Christmas Message, 1967, The Solar Bodies. By Samael Aun Weor, Part 2. Chapter 19. Mercury. Mercury, the messenger of the gods, is at a distance of 42 times the diameter of his progenitor, the Sun. If we make a chart with minor and major conjunctions, we would then anticipate, with absolute certainty, that the planetary influence would increase or decrease. Thus, we will see that Mercury and Venus repeat their maximum effect every 8 years. The concentrical orbits of the planets are, without a doubt, intimately related with the law of Bode. If we take the following geometrical development, 0, 3, 6, 12, 24, 48, 96, 192, and if we add 4 to each number, then we achieve a series of numbers which, more or less, represent the distance between the planetary orbits and the Sun. The sizes of the planets vary among them. They marvelously grow from the smallest Mercury, which is the planet nearest to the king star, the Sun, or which is nearest to the center of the system, to the largest thundering Jupiter, which is located at half of the distance between the center and the periphery. After Jupiter, the planets decrease in size again until reaching the most known distant planet. This is the terrible Pluto, which is a little bit bigger than Mercury. While more distant, the apparent velocities of the planets are slower. These diminish from about 50 kilometers a second for Mercury, until 5 kilometers a second for the mystic and wise Neptune. It is clear that this is a characteristic of the decrease of the Sun's emitted impulses. The Sun's impulses decrease when penetrating more and more profoundly into the distance. The fast movement of the planet Mercury has a decisive influence upon the thyroid gland. The orbit of Mercury is so eccentric, and its period is so ephemeral that any of its cycles seriously studied will actually be excessively erratic. As an astrological planet, Mercury is even more mysterious than Venus itself, and it is identical to the Mazdaist Mitra. Mercury is Buddha, the genie or god who is situated between the Sun and the Moon. He is the perpetual companion of the Sun of Wisdom. In Greek mythology, Mercury displayed wings in order to express how he assisted the Sun on its sidereal course. Mercury was called Nuncio and Wolf of the Sun, Solaris Luminis Particeps. He was the chief and the evoker of the souls, the Kabir and Hierophant. Virgil describes Mercury holding the caduceus or hammer of 2 serpents in order to evoke to a new life those unhappy souls who were precipitated into the orco of classic Greeks, the Christian limbo, tum virgum capit, hac animus al evocat orco, with the purpose of having them enter into the celestial militia. Mercury, the Orion planet, is the one which the Hierophants prohibited to name. In Greek mythology, Mercury is symbolized by the famous hare-hunting dogs, or guardian dogs of the celestial cattle that drink from the very pure fountains of occult wisdom. This is why Mercury is also known as Hermes Anubis, the good inspirator, or Agatha demon. He flies over the earth like the bird of Argos, thus, the earth mistakes him for the sun itself. Respectively, they both represent the Hindu Sarama and Saramia. Traditions state that the Emperor Juliano prayed every night to the occult sun through the intercession of Mercury, for as the very wise Vossius stated, all theologians asseverate that Mercury and the sun are one. This is why Mercury was considered to be the most eloquent and wise of the gods, a fact which is not strange since Mercury is found so close to the wisdom and to the word, or logos, and was mistaken for both. Within the submerged Atlantis, under the domes and roofs of the Temple of Hercules, within the divine crypt of the mysterious Hermes, the planet Mercury gloriously shined upon the sacred altar. Mercury, the astrological Hermes, is the god of wisdom known in Egypt, Syria, and Phoenicia as Thot, Tat, Adad, Adam, Cadmon, and Enoch. In the Temple of Hercules, inside that mysterious mansion covered by gray clouds, the neophyte was only allowed to see the planet Mercury as a supreme spirit, floating upon the gene-sick waters of the first instant. The well-known initiatic lake would never be missing from within that crypt of Mercury where, for every representation of mystery, the waters appeared sinisterly black like bitumen. Before the sight of Atlantean neophytes, such a fatal lake appeared to be framed between 4 typical hills, such as the ones that are usually represented in certain nobiliary paintings. This sexual symbol reminds us of one of the tales from the 1001 Nights that has the title of The Prince from the Four Black Islands. The prince of such tale truly existed in Atlantis, in the mysterious Olysis. He was the son of an initiate king from the Garden of Hesperides, which was the initiatic center of the good law. That prince could not be crowned king because when he was submitted to initiatic ordeals he could not successfully resist the cruel sexual temptations of Catebet, she of the gloomy destinies. Adam and Eve came out of paradise for having eaten the forbidden fruit. However, the apples of gold or the apples of Freya and the liquor of Soma or biblical manna constitute the fundamental food for the astral. Let us remember that the sexual hierogram of Io corresponds to the host of Elohim, the fathers or pitris of humanity. The ens seminis is the mercury of secret philosophy within which the whole ens virtutis of the sacred fire is found. The Nordic swastika contains within itself the secret clue of the sexual transmutation. This is why this rune is the electric mill of physics. The swastika is an alchemical, cosmogonical, and anthropological sign, under 7 different interpretative clues. The swastika is the symbol of transcendental electricity, the alpha and the omega of the universal sexual force from the spirit down to the matter. Therefore, whosoever achieves to comprehend its mystic significance is free from the great Maya or illusion. The 3 letters AZF are the 3 initials of the great arcanum. Whosoever knows the great arcanum can transmute the black waters of Mercury of the secret philosophy in order to liberate energy within the lunar human quaternary. Only with violence and rebelliousness can the kingdom of heaven be conquered. In ancient times there existed 5 most celebrated temples of mysteries which remind us of the Temple of Hercules in Atlantis. The first of these temples was indeed named after Hercules, the second was the Temple of the Gallic Mars, the third was the Temple of Minerva Meliense, the fourth was the Temple of Diana of Ephesus, and the fifth was the Temple of Isis of the Nile. Every temple of mysteries has 3 successive altars. The first is the altar of poverty, of the beginner. The second is the altar of the supreme art of alchemy, of the companion. The third is the altar of death upon which any resurrected master has triumphed. The Sahaja Methuna, sexual magic, is the science of Peter. This holy apostle from the mysteries of Jesus has the keys of the kingdom. The original name of Peter is Pater, and the 3 consonants P, T, R are carved with a chisel and hammer upon the living stone that serves as a door to the kingdom. The letter P reminds us of the pitris or parents of humanity. The letter T reminds us of the man and the woman sexually united. The mystic letter R reminds us of the Egyptian Ra, the sacred fire. The sexual stone, the philosophical stone of medieval alchemists, is the magical bet-ilo of all countries, the Sculapian ostrite. It is the stone with which Machaon healed Philoctetes. Let us remember the howling, oscillating, runic and uttering stones of the teraphims, as well as the stones of lightning, and of the Orphic galactite, etc. Only Mercury of secret philosophy, the messenger of the gods, can by means of the Sahaja Methuna, sexual magic, summon the innocent souls out from limbo. Chapter 20. The sexual glands. The gonads of the woman are the ovaries, breasts, and the uterus. The gonads of the man are the testicles, the phallus, and the prostate gland. These are the generative, reproductive, or sexual endocrine glands within which salvation or condemnation for human beings is found. An in-depth study of the sexual glands shows us that these glands are governed by Uranus, the planet of Aquarius. The sexual glands have a dual function, because not only do they have external secretion but also internal secretion. Scientists know very well that the ovaries do not only produce ovums, they also generate a marvelous endocrine substance, a very rich elixir that vitalizes the woman and makes her feminine. As an external secretion, the testicles have the ens seminis, the mercury of secret philosophy, that carries the spermatozoids which are collected by the prostate gland. The intimate hormonal incretion of the cortex of the testicles is the marvelous force that gives energy to the male and what makes him essentially masculine in the most complete sense of the word. The great female initiate from the 19th century Helen Petrovna Blavatsky stated in her book The Secret Doctrine that in the beginning life was reproduced and perpetuated by means of sprouts or buds or by means of fissures or gaps. The collective host of Elohim, symbolized by the sexual hierogram of Eo, was reincarnated within the three first root races in order to populate the world. They populated the world without the necessity of sexual intercourse, because in those ancient times humanity was first androgynous and later hermaphrodite. The division into opposite sexes and the reproduction by sexual cooperation transformed the human biped into a beast. The transcendental electricity, the universal creative force, is the Alpha and the Omega, the beginning and the end of all things. Through the sexual force we can convert ourselves into angels or into devils, into gods or into beasts. In the name of truth, we declare that we will never commit the mistake of recommending sexual abstinence. Intimate self-realization cannot be achieved based on sexual abstinence. The only thing that lunar people will achieve with sexual abstinence is to charge themselves with terribly malignant poison-inioscirian vibrations. The poison-inioscirian vibrations produce in people a high degree of fanaticism and expert cynicism. These types of people were abundant among the great inquisitors, for example, Tomas of Torquemada. During many years of observation and experience, we have proven that the tenebrous poison-inioscirian vibrations have the power of awakening the abominable Kundartagwaiter organ. Obligatory sexual abstinence is only for the members of the occult fraternity. Obligatory sexual abstinence is only for geniuses like Jesus, Hermes, Buddha, Zoroaster, and in general for all the twice-born initiates, the children of the sun, the selected ones, the solar race. In-depth self-realization is only possible in normal men and women. It is understood that a normal man is a male who has normal sexual masculine gonads. It is understood that a normal woman is a female who has normal sexual feminine gonads. Not a single degenerated seed can germinate. This is why intimate self-realization is impossible for either homosexuals or lesbians. An excessive number of pregnancies indicate too much fornication. The karmic outcome of these pregnancies is a sickness known as osteomalacia or deformities caused by the softening of bones. This is very common in those densely populated countries of Europe and Asia. Several pregnancies deplete the reserves of calcium, thus, naturally the bones begin to give way. There is a vulgar saying that states, each pregnancy costs a tooth. Many women suffer disturbances in their teeth during their pregnancy. The cooperation among the endocrine glands is marvelous. Some of the endocrine glands act as accelerators of the sexual glands and others diminish such an action. It has been completely proven that the thymus gland restrains the sexual appetite. Scientists have discovered that the thyroid and pituitary glands exert certain very intimate functions related with the sexual expression. The prostate gland, which is where the seminal fluid, the mercury of secret philosophy, is stored, is situated at the base of the bladder, around its neck. A very exceptional importance was always given to the prostate gland by ancient Medic magicians. Since archaic times, the hierophants or kabirs of the sacred initiatic colleges considered the prostate as one of the most important organs for the exercise of high magic. The prostate gland exercises a decisive influence upon the vital fluids that circulate through the nervous system. Through observation and experience, many medics have proven that males become irritable neurasthenic, marked with suicidal tendencies when their prostate gland is inflamed. Therefore, if their prostate is treated, many of these individuals could be restored and would be able to return to their normal activities. The hypertrophy of the prostate gland is very common amongst the elders. This is due to the hypersecretion of the masculine hormone. Fundamentally, this hypersecretion is due to an overexcitation of the testicles through the gonadotropic hormone secreted by the pituitary gland. Sexual abuse originates prostatic sicknesses. It is known that the ovaries emit an ovum every 28 days in accordance with the lunar cycle. According to the lunar cycle that governs conception, every 28 days the ovaries emit a feminine egg that is collected inside one of the fallopian tubes and wisely conducted into the uterus, where it has to encounter the masculine germ or zoosperm, if another life is to begin. The impelling force performed between the masculine and feminine germs is astonishing when they want to encounter each other. The rich nourishment for the newly born child is formed within the maternal breasts. The maternal milk cannot be replaced by any other food. Menstruation periods define the epochs of feminine sexual activity. During these cycles of passionate impulses, the egg is maturing, it is prepared and ejected towards the uterus for its fecundation. At the same time, certain astonishing, marvelous, functional changes are effectuated within the female's external and internal sexual organs. These changes also occur within the microlaboratories called mammary glands. The uterus is the sacred maternal cloister, the feminine sexual organ within which the fetus is developed. The uterus is the vestibule of the world. Uterine inflammation produces irritability, sadness, and neurasthenia. Biology has discovered that a very intimate alliance exists between the posterior pituitary and the uterus. If some drops of the post-pituitary extract are injected into the circulation, then an intense contraction of the uterus will inevitably happen. Scholars of science still do not assert that they comprehend the reason for the miracle, during parturition, of the opportune intervention of the post-pituitary endocrine substance, which reaches the uterine cells in order to produce, at the precise moment, the rhythmic contractions which are so necessary in order to expel the child. The sexual force is the creative energy of the third logos, without which nobody would be able to achieve intimate self-realization. To disclose the most profound themes of sexual mysteries within the field of medical science is equivalent to the unleashing of winds enclosed within a skin bag which Aeolus gave unto Ulysses. Chapter 21. The caduceus of Mercury. The vertebral or rachis column is harmoniously formed by the perfect superposition of 33 vertebrae which form a precious sheath for the spinal medulla. With absolute precision, the spinal medulla is situated in the posterior and in the middle of the trunk, and 5 parts or regions are exposed with complete clarity: cervical, dorsal, lumbar, sacral, and coccygeal. Among the total vertebrae, pyramids or canyons, as is stated in occult science, 7 are cervical, 12 are dorsal, 5 are lumbar, 5 are sacral, and 4 are coccygeal. Doctor of medicine know very well that the cervical, dorsal, and lumbar vertebrae remain independent from one another, yet the sacral and coccygeal are united with an astonishing eurythmy in order to respectively form the sacrum and the coccyx. A careful study of the vertebral column allows us to comprehend that all of the vertebrae have a series of common characteristics, but they also present other characteristics which are particular to each of their regions. In itself, a vertebra is constituted of an osseous mass of a more or less cylindrical body that occupies its anterior part. From that anterior part, 2 anteroposterior columns are detached in the lateral parts of its posterior face. These are called peduncles, which wisely connect the body with a series of protrusions called transverse apophysis, articulated apophysis, spinal apophysis, and vertebral laminas. Between the latter and the vertebral body, a broad orifice remains that in union with the rest of the vertebrae form an approximately cylindrical conduct or vertebral conduct that is very well known by the scholars of science. Within this tube the spinal medulla is situated in a marvelous and extraordinary way. The vertebral body is more or less cylindrical. In its lateral and anterior faces it has its surface excavated in a vertical way, while the posterior face is slightly excavated in a transverse manner, thus constituting the rachis tube. The base of the cylinder or superior and inferior faces of the body are horizontal and a little concave, since the periphery is clearly more protruded than in the center. In the later, they present multiple and marvelous orifices, while the periphery is extraordinarily composed of a compact tissue. According to yogis from Hindustan, 2 nervous currents, called Ida and Pingla, exist around the vertebral column, as well as a profound canal called Sushumna that runs inside and along the spinal medulla. Within the inferior extremity of this canal resides what the yogis of Hindustan call the lotus of Kundalini. Hindustani sages state that such a lotus is triangular. This solar electronic sexual force called Kundalini is found coiled up within such lotus or coccygeal magnetic center. When this electronic solar fire is awakened in a truly positive way, it opens the membranous bag, within which the solar fire is enclosed, and penetrates through the inferior orifice of the spinal medulla. Such a membranous bag is hermetically sealed in ordinary people, yet the seminal vapors open up such an orifice so that the solar fire can penetrate through it. The successive layers of the spirit open up one after the other as the electronic solar fire is elevated degree by degree through the Sushumna canal. This is how the initiate acquires all of the different visions and marvelous powers of the saints. When the electronic solar fire reaches the brain, then one is completely detached from the physical body and from the external sensorial perceptions. We know that the shape of the spinal medulla is very special. If we observe the sign of the infinite, the Holy Eight placed horizontally, we then see two parts that are reunited in the center. Let us suppose, beloved reader, that you gather many horizontal eights and stack them up one on top of the other at their base, then all of these horizontal eights will give you the shape of the spinal medulla. Ancient wisdom teaches that there exists a pair of sympathetic nervous cords that in the form of a holy eight are entwined around the spinal medulla. Many pseudo-esoteric and pseudo-occultist authors mistakenly suppose that such cords depart from the coccygeal region. However, Sivananda in his book Kundalini Yoga goes further as this matter. He affirms that these cords have their origin in the very sexual organs. The root of such cords must be found within the testicles of the male and the ovaries of the female. The left side is Ida and the right side is Pingla. The profound canal that runs within the spinal medulla is Sushumna. The order of Ida and Pingla are found inverted within the woman, thus, Pingla is on the left side and Ida on the right side. To its disciples, the secret doctrine teaches that Ida is of a lunar nature and that Pingla is of a solar nature. Hindustani yogis affirm that Ida is found intimately related with the left nostril and that Pingla is related with the right nostril. The relation of these cords with the nostrils, as we already stated, is inverted in the woman. However, the order of these factors does not alter the product. The Gnostic movement teaches its disciples that from their seminal system, during the esoteric practices of sexual transmutation, the lunar atoms ascend through the nervous canal of Ida and the solar atoms victoriously ascend through Pingla. Ida and Pingla are the two witnesses of the apocalypse, revelation, the two olive branches and the two candlesticks that stand before the God of the earth. In-depth investigations allow us to comprehend that Ida and Pingla end by forming a gracious knot in that frontal region situated between the eyebrows. Thereafter, they continue through certain subtle conducts that depart from the root of the nose through some very fine osseous canals, where the endings of some nerves are stimulated. These nerves also receive stimulation during certain esoteric practices. In the final synthesis, those canals connect Ida and Pingla with the esoteric heart or marvelous magnetic center situated in the region of the thalamus. The esoteric heart is the capital center that controls the physical heart. The chakra of the tranquil heart is controlled by the capital chakra that is situated in the thalamus. The esoterist sages of Laya Yoga state that within the region of the thalamus that mysterious nervous canal called Amrita Nadi is found. This accomplishes the specific mission of connecting the esoteric heart with the famous Anahata chakra, the magnetic lotus of the physical heart. By means of all of these mysterious sets of subtle canals, Ida and Pingla continue until reaching the heart. Factually, this is how Ida and Pingla connect the sexual organs with the heart. Subsequent investigations allow us to comprehend that the Amrita Nadi has amongst other functions one that is very remarkable, that is to connect the esoteric heart of the thalamus with that lotus of 1,000 petals situated in the pineal gland, in the superior part of the brain. The dorsal spine is that reed similar to a measuring rod that the Book of Revelations refers to. This is the staff of Brahma, the rod of Aaron, the caduceus of Mercury with its two entwined serpents. The spinal medulla ends with a type of swelling. This is the rachis bulbar. This is not attached to the brain, but instead it floats over a certain kind of liquid. Thus, if the head receives a whack, the force of that impact is safeguarded by the liquid and the rachis bulbar does not receive any damage. The salvation of the human being resides exclusively in the medulla and in the semen. Thus, everything that does not go through this way is a lamentable waste of time. Chapter 22. White Tantrism. Some esoterists, with tendencies towards Oriental esotericism, who traveled in the East, had investigated the Asiatic continent, and had arrived at the conclusion that in Tibet as well as in India, Tantrism is the only truly practical school. Many ashrams exist in the sacred land of the Vedas. They practice and study yoga within these ashrams. However, the most serious ashrams are exclusively those where the tantric teaching is abundant. In the Hindustani markets, studious travelers can find marvelous tantric books like Kama Kulpa and Kama Sutra. These books are illustrated with splendid photographs related to certain sacred sculptures and bas-reliefs of their temples. A careful examination of those photographs allows us to collect very interesting information about tantric methuna, sexual yoga. The tantric type of hatha yoga is extraordinary and leads the esoterist to intimate self-realization. However, hatha yoga without tantrism is like a garden without water. The Hindu esoteric school of Laya Yoga with its famous Laya Kriya Tantric Sadhana is, by all means, marvelous and leads the neophytes to the intimate self-realization. If Yogananda would have accepted matrimony, it is clear that his guru would have given him the complete Kriya. An in-depth Tantrism exists in Chinese, Chan, Buddhism and Al in Japanese Zen. It is lamentable that many Orientalists are content with the mere exterior cortex of Buddhism. The medullary bone of esoteric Buddhism and of Taoism is Tantrism, Mithuna, sexual yoga. The tantric practitioners from secret Tibet and sacred India practice the positive sexual yoga, this is, to connect the lingam yoni without the ejaculation of the ens seminis. The tantric gurus of Tibet and Hindustan are strict. Before the male and female yogi couple has the right to practice the tantric sadhana, a sexual position which is very special for the sexual connection among the tantric practitioners, they first must become experts in the exercises of Laya Kriya. Frankly, we cannot and must not deny that the Kama Kulpa teaches many tantric sadhanas. However, here we only cite the one in which the male is seated in Padmasana, or in the Buddhic style, or simply with his legs crossed in the Oriental style, and practices the sexual union with his female yogi. Thus, the female yogi initiate has to sit on top of the legs of her male yogi and skillfully cross her legs in such a way that the trunk of her male yogi is enveloped by them. An interchange of caresses between the man and the woman is previously required in order to perform the sexual connection of the lingam yoni during this tantric sadhana. Thus, the woman finally absorbs the phallus. This tantric connubial practice demands an absolute quietude and mental silence in order to avoid the tenebrous intervention of the pluralized I. Strong electromagnetic currents exuberantly flow in those instants of supreme voluptuousness, thus the couple enters into ecstasy or samadhi. A guru directs this esoteric work. He makes strong magnetic strokes on the coccyx of both man and woman with the purpose of awakening the electronic solar fire, the igneous serpent of our magical powers. This is a system that transmutes the sexual energy into ajas, Christic force. The couple must restrain the sexual impulse and avoid the ejaculation of the semen. The coitus interruptus, the restrained sexual impulse, makes the sexual energy of the third logos to inwardly and upwardly return throughout the canals of Ida and Pingla. Mithuna originates within the coccyx, close to the triveni of the microcosmic human being, an extraordinary contact between the solar and lunar atoms of the seminal system. The advent of the fire is the outcome of the contact between the solar and lunar atoms of the seminal system. The Gnostic Tantric sadhana is very simple. During the Tantric act, man and woman practice in the normal or ordinary sexual position. What is important is to withdraw from the sexual act before the spasm in order to avoid the ejaculation of their semen. E-A-O is the Tantric mantra of excellence. The letter E reminds us of Ignis, the fire. The letter A is the aqua, the water. The letter O signifies origam, the spirit. E-A-O must be chanted during the practice of Mithuna. It is very interesting that the sexual gonads are esoterically governed by Uranus, the planet of Aquarius. Uranus was a divine king from primeval Atlantis. Uranus reminds us of Uranus, the primordial fire and water. This is equivalent to the establishment of the first lunisolar cult of the androgynous Io, in other words, the apparition of the astrological Chaldean. Therefore, Uranus, the Ahura Maya, the first Atlantean, is factually the first revealer of sexual mysteries. One has to descend into the ninth sphere, sex, in order to work with the primordial fire and the water, origin of worlds, beasts, human beings, and gods. Every authentic white initiation begins there. The advent of the fire is the most extraordinary cosmic event. The fire transforms us radically. It is worth remembering the chaos of the ancient, sacred fire of Zoroaster, or the Atashbevran of the Parsis, the fire of Hermes, the fire of Helms of ancient Germans. Do not mistake Hermes with Helms. Let us remember the flashing lightning of Cybele, the torch of Apollo, the flame of the altar of Pan, the imperishable fire in the temple of Apollo, and in the temple of Vesta, the fiery flame in the helmet of Pluto, the shining sparks on the hats of the Dioscuri, on the head of the Gorgons, on the helmet of Pallas, and on the caduceus of Mercury. Other representations of the advent of the fire are the Egyptian Tara, the Greek Katabates Zeus, which descended from heaven to earth in accordance with Pausanias, likewise. The Pentecostal tongues of fire and the flaming bush of Moses. This is very similar to the burning tunnel which brought about the founding of Mexico. Also, the column of fire in the Exodus, the imperishable lamp of Abraham. Moreover, the eternal fire of the bottomless abyss or pleroma, the fulgent vapors of the oracle of Delphi, the sidereal light of the Rosicrucian Gnostics, the Akash of the Hindustani adepts, the astral light of Eliphaz Levi, the aura and fluid of magnetizers, the Od of Reichenbach, the psychod and the actinic force, the thuri that is analogous to the highest hypnotic states of Roches and Acaroist, the rays of Blondot and many others like the psychic force of Sergeant Cox, the atmospheric magnetism of some naturists, galvanism, and in some, electricity. These examples are nothing more than different names for the unlimited number of manifestations of that mysterious Proteus that has been named the Archeus of the Greeks. The ascent of the sacred fire degree by degree through the Sushumna canal is very slow and difficult. Any single ejaculation of the semen is enough in order for the fire to descend one or more spinal vertebrae in accordance with the magnitude of the fault. Jesus the great Kabir had said, "The disciple must not allow himself to fall, because the disciple who consents in falling must fight very hard afterwards in order to recuperate what he has lost." The Maithuna, sexual yoga, Gnostic tantrism, can only be practiced between a man and a woman who are legitimately constituted as spouses. White tantrism forbids its male adepts and affiliates to practice Maithuna with many women. White tantrism forbids the Gnostic sisters to practice Maithuna with different men. They must only practice sexual magic with their own spouse. Chapter 23. The Chakras. Very interesting data and references in relation to chakras, churches, lotus flowers or magnetic centers of the dorsal spine are abundant in occultist literature. A very careful analysis upon this matter of the 7 magnetic centers of the dorsal spine takes us to the logical conclusion that there are 3 that are particularly the most important: the Muladhara at the base of the dorsal spine, coccygeal bone, the Sahasrara, the cervical lotus of 1,000 petals, and the Manipura, the umbilical lotus. It is urgent to eliminate from our perceptions all of the subjective elements. It is indispensable to perceive in a spatial and self-cognizant manner everything that we see and imagine. It is indispensable to awaken the consciousness. Everything which the human multitudes perceive, imagine or dream, have a real existence within the ordinary space called Mahakasha or elemental space. When a Gnostic initiate observes the dreams of each person who wanders in the streets with their consciousness asleep, when he reads the thoughts of other people or perceives supersensible objects, he can verify for himself that in reality everything exists within a kind of superior space called Chitakasha or mental space. When perception has remained without object and the soul shines within her own nature, then one has what is called Chidakasha or space of knowledge. When the electronic solar fire called Kundalini has entered into activity by means of Maithuna or sexual magic, when the igneous serpent of our magical powers has been shaken from its languorousness and penetrates within the Sushumna canal, then all of perceptions are found within the mental space. It is indispensable to know that when the electronic solar fire has reached the extremity of the canal that opens up within the brain, then, the perception without the object is related to the space of knowledge. Any human being can send an electric current through a thread, yet nature does not need a certain type of thread in order to send its formidable currents. All sensations and movements of the body reach the brain or are emitted by it throughout the length of certain nervous fibers or conductor threads. The bunch of motor fibers and sensorial fibers within the spinal medulla are the Ida and Pingla of the Hindustani yogis. These fibers are the two witnesses of revelation, the marvelous canals through which the afferent and efferent currents splendidly circulate. The spirit can send its messages, its news, its information without any type of conductor thread. Gnostics asseverate that they can send any mental current through that profound Sushumna canal without any nervous fiber playing the part of a conductor thread. The longing for every Gnostic is to become the owner and lord of that marvelous Sushumna canal. In fact, to gain control of such a canal signifies that one holds the scepter of power. It is a relatively easy task to send someone a mental message or a telepathic message when the vibratory current of thought is sent through the Sushumna canal. Within ordinary people, run-of-the-mill individuals, or wretched intellectual animals, the Sushumna canal is sealed in its inferior extremity, thus, not a single action passes through it. However, the Gnostic knows exercises with which one can open the Sushumna canal, thus, one can pass the nervous currents through it. The seminal vapors have the power of opening up the Sushumna canal. The Sushumna canal is opened by means of Mithuna. In fact, to receive the messages of the spirit in a direct way through the Sushumna canal means to be free from any material slavery. To transmute the sexual energy into ojas, Christic force, is only possible through the formidable magical powers of the chakra Muladhara in the coccyx. Only the true chaste man and woman can elevate their ojas and can store it within their brains. Chastity has always been considered as the highest virtue. It has been stated that as the quantity of ojas increases within the brain of a human being, so does the level of intelligence and spirituality. Any fornicator can utilize beautiful words and express beautiful thoughts without causing the least bit of an impression in those who listen to him. However, the chaste person, even when he lacks beautiful language, can enchant an auditorium with his words, because all of his movements and mannerisms, words and looks carry the power of ojas. To acquire the complete control upon the waters of life without the marvelous magical powers of the prostatic or uterine chakra or swadhisthana is impossible. Not a single magician can dominate the fire from the volcanoes of the earth without the formidable igneous powers of umbilical chakra or manipura. Without the extraordinary powers of the anahata chakra or magnetic center of the heart, the Gnostics could not project themselves in their astral bodies at will or place their physical bodies in jinn state in order to soar through the air or walk on the waters or pass through a mountain from one side to the other, through the subterranean world, without receiving any harm. Indeed, the synthetical conceptualism of the great initiates would not exist, and the development of clairaudience or the magic ear of the wise would be impossible without the mysterious powers of the verb contained within the Vishuddha or laryngeal chakra. Without the formidable esoteric powers of the ajna, or famous frontal chakra, no one can develop that marvelous faculty called clairvoyance, which allows us to read the thoughts of our fellow men as easily as when we read an open book. Not a single initiate can conquer the powers of polyvoyance and intuition without the crown of saints, the famous lotus of 1,000 petals situated in the pineal gland, within the superior part of the brain. We know by direct experience that the electronic solar fire has the power of opening those lotus flowers, those magnetic chakras of the dorsal spine. The Hindustani school of Laya Yoga affirms that the spinal medulla is a prolongation of the brain. We do not have any objections to the former statement because it is right. However, another thing is the mistaken explanation that such a school gives in relation to the chakras or magnetic centers of the dorsal spine. They erroneously consider the chakras to be an absolute exclusivity of the brain. The cited Oriental school erroneously states that these psychic centers reside exclusively within the brain and that by physiological sympathy they give the impression of being situated within certain parts of the body. Allow us to asseverate along with HPB that, indeed, occult anatomy teaches that the 7 spinal chakras exist in the already mentioned places and that these spinal chakras are controlled by the 7 capital chakras of the brain. We accept that the magnetic center of the physical heart is controlled by the esoteric heart situated in the region of the cerebral thalamus. Thus, any spinal chakra has its correspondent capital chakra in the brain. Indeed, it is an absurdity that the cited Oriental school considers the spinal chakras as mere illusory reflections of the psychic cerebral centers based on the above-mentioned statements. The 7 capital chakras intensely vibrate in any brain that is charged with ojas, Christic force. The Sanskrit term ojas means transmuted sexual energy, a type of Christic force. The semen is transmuted by means of Methuna into subtle vapors, and these in turn convert themselves into energies that bipolarize in order to rise through Ida and Pingla up to the brain. In order for the semen to be converted into ojas, Christic force, this must become cerebrated. In order for the brain to be charged with ojas, Christic force, this must become semenized. Methuna, sexual yoga allows us to lead the electronic solar fire towards the cerebral region called Kamakala. Here are found the 5 centers that in their conjunction constitute the Sahasrara, the lotus of 1,000 petals situated in the pineal gland, the king of the chakras. The first of these Sahasraras 5 lotuses is the lotus of 12 petals. The second is the Tribona or triangle of fire, the third is Nada Bindu. The fourth is Manipatin and the 5th is Hamsa. The triangle is wisely situated over the Manipatin with Nada above and Bindu below. Hamsa is the habitat of the soul, and it is placed above all of the former ones. The 5 flowers of the Sahasrara gloriously shine with the Kundalini. Chapter 24. The Magisterium of Fire. Adorable souls who study with sincerity this message of this cosmic festival of Christmas 1967, the time has come in which we must profoundly comprehend what the Magisterium of Fire truly is. It is urgent to descend into the 9th sphere, into the somber well that is the very depth of the whole universe in order to work with the fire and the water, the origin of worlds, beasts, human beings, and gods. Every authentic white initiation begins there. But let those melodious maidens from ancient times, by whose aid Amphion lay down the foundation of Thebes, assist me with this chapter, so that with truth, my style will not retract from the nature of this matter. You who descend into the obscure well, sex, you who are going to work in the Magisterium of Fire, you who want to hold the scepter of kings. The rod of Aaron, the staff of Brahma, in your dexterous hand, remember at every moment the dantesque warning, look how thou walkest. Take good heed, thy soles do tread not on the heads of thy poor brethren. Frozen lake whose frozen surface seems as if it were made out of a liquid, flexible, malleable glass. This is the intimate secret aspect of the semen within the sexual glands of the lost souls. Within the 9th sphere of hell, Dante found those weeping in livid shadows submerged within the ice, all the way up to that mysterious area where the sexual organs are found. Such a depressing fate appears within lunar people, their faces held downward, their mouths blowing the cold, and their terrene eyes express the pain of their hearts with frozen tears. Only the fire can melt the frozen pools, those pools where the lost ones live. The secret fire of alchemists is the Kundalini. It is the serpentine or annular power working within the body of the ascetic. Indeed, this is an electrical igneous, occult or phohatic power. It is the great pristine, marvelous, and astonishing force that underlies within every organic or inorganic matter. Undoubtedly, this is an electronic spiritual type of force, a creative power that when awakened to action, can easily heal or kill, create or destroy. Now you will comprehend the reason for the dantesque warning to all those who dare to descend into the 9th sphere, sex. In reference to this living and terribly divine fire, the Rosicrucian Gnostic state, all possibilities are awakened within nature by the action of the secret fire assisted by the elemental fire. The secret fire is invisible, it is contained within everything. It is the most potential and powerful fire, and the external and visible fire cannot be compared with it. This is the fire that Moses used in order to burn the golden calf. It is the fire that Jeremiah hid, yet it was found by knowledgeable sages 70 years later. However, at that time that fire was transformed into water. 2 Mark 1 and 2. Not a single alchemical process can grow to perfection without the presence of this fire. Therefore, it is recommendable that if there is anything that the students of alchemy yearn to find, they should search amidst the Rosicrucian's secret symbols. The authentic and genuine Rosicrucian school does not exist in the physical world. In the name of truth, I have to state that I have the high honor of being a member of the Rosicrucian Temple of Cummings in the internal worlds. The 4 alchemical rules are: 1. Dominate the animal nature. Remember that without thelema, willpower, the weak and cowardly intellectual beasts fail in the great work. 2. First know, then act. Remember that real knowledge is only acquired through profound meditation. 3. Do not use common procedures. Use only one vessel, one fire, one instrument. Remember that this signifies that Maithuna, sexual yoga, must only be practiced between a man and a woman who are legitimately constituted as spouses. Those who practice Maithuna to perform adultery will enter into the submerged devolution within the infernal worlds. 4. Keep the fire constantly burning. Remember, good disciple, that whosoever ejaculates the seminal liquor loses the sacred fire. Woe unto the Samson of the Kabbalah if he permits himself to be put asleep by Delilah. The Hercules of science, who exchanges his royal scepter for the distaff of Omphale, will soon experience the vengeance of Deianira, and nothing will be left for him but the pyre of Mount Ida, in order to escape the devouring folds of the Code of Nessus. The symbolic coat of arms of Aracena, Spain, made up by Don Benito himself or by his Templar antecessors, is a magisterial heraldic compendium that encloses in itself the whole magisterium of fire. Actually, this magisterial compendium, coat of arms, is formed by 3 barracks which are separated by what seems to be Templar Tau. The Tau is formed by a horizontal throne of clouds that can be climbed up by the vertical pole that forms such a Tau. In turn, the vertical pole is formed by 1 symbolic sword and 1 symbolic club, which are united by 5 rungs or strides that are made up of a number of princes' crowns, mundane crowns, passionate crowns, vain crowns. The crowns must be trampled upon by the aspirant in order to climb up to that heavenly throne. Above such a throne, amidst the clouds, only a hermetically sealed door can be seen. Undoubtedly, this is a porta coeli. Heavenly door. A mysterious hand armed with a key goes towards the door. The key symbolizes the clue keeper of the great secret of the initiation into the mysteries of the kingdom, which is behind that mystic door. The Barak of the left shows a marvelous, embattled tower similar to the Barak of the cardinalist coat of arms of the Bishop Moya. A splendid torrent of living water, ens seminis, resplendently flows from such tower. The Barak of the right is always showing delectable Elysian fields with the goddess Eve, Vesta, Hestia, or the earth herself, crowned with flowers and fruits under a paradisiacal tree. The Latin phrase that says hac via iter ad astra, which means, this is the way that leads to heaven, gloriously shines around this marvelous coat of arms. The entire coat of arms is the symbol of the sexual Tau, with its horizontal pole formed by the clouds of mystery. The clouds hide the narrow path that lead to the truth, and its vertical pole is the difficult ladder that rests on the flaming sword and on the scepter or club, symbol of the dominion over our passions. The 5 prince-like crowns that are placed in a manner of rungs, which we must trample upon in order to climb this ladder, reminds us that in the ascension through all the esoteric degrees of the 5 initiations of fire, we must trample upon any ostentation, any human ambition, until by climbing the ladder, we reach the closed door, porta coeli, whose magical key can only be given to us by a master. On the left and on the right of the vertical pole of the sexual Tau stands the castle of the saved jewel, speaking chivalrously, from which the splendid torrent of living water, ens seminis, resplendently flows to fecundate the world, ego sut resurrector air vita, and the Elysian fields, where Ceres the Mother Earth appears crowned with flowers and fruits. The symbolic coat of arms of Aracena is absolutely sexual. The clue of any power is found in the connection of the phallus and the uterus. The electronic solar fire has 7 degrees of power. There are 7 serpents, 2 groups of 3 plus the coronation of the 7th tongue of fire that unites us with the One, with the Law, with the Father. To raise the 5 fundamental serpents by means of Maithuna, sexual yoga, is basic. Because the 2 superior serpents are always raised. When we carefully observe any solar man, we can then verify that each one of the 7 serpents are raised in the medullary canal of his respective vehicles. The first serpent corresponds to the physical body. The second serpent corresponds to the vital body or Hindustani lingam sarira. The third serpent victoriously rises through the Sushumna canal of the authentic and genuine astral body. The fourth serpent victoriously rises in the authentic solar mental body. The fifth serpent rises through the medullary canal of the true solar body of the conscious will. Chapter 25. Pranayama. A judicious study of the marvelous esoteric work The Voice of the Silence by Helena Petrovna Blavatsky takes us to the logical conclusion that 7 tremendous initiatic gates exist. By all means, it is clear that to reach the 5th gate is fundamental because for the warrior the 2 superior gates are always open. In various Masonic degrees they made reference to that symbolic esoteric ladder that unites the earth with heaven. This is the same ladder that the incarnated angel Israel, whose profane name was Jacob, saw in his dreams. Mistakenly, many believe that the coccygeal chakra, with its 4 marvelous petals, is the first rung of the holy ladder. Many suppose that the prostatic, uterine, chakra, splendid lotus of 6 petals, is the second rung of the mystic ladder. There are many who hold the opinion that the umbilical chakra, luminous jewel of 10 petals, located in the center of the lumbar region, is the third rung. Many pseudo-esoterists and pseudo-occultists want to see the 4th rung in the cardias with its famous 12 petals. Opinions exist about many things. This is why they believe that the laryngeal chakra, with its 16 precious petals, is the 6th rung. Many are convinced in a way that the 6th center situated in the head between the 2 eyebrows and its 2 extraordinary and resplendent petals are the 6th rung of the mystical ladder. In some, we never fail to see pseudo-esoterists and pseudo-occultists who still believe that the lotus of 1,000 petals, the seat of Shiva in the pineal gland, superior part of the brain, is the 7th rung of Jacob's ladder. In synthesis, it is right to state that the Sahasrara, the malup or precious lotus of 1,000 petals, is located in the vertex of the head. It is also right to asseverate that this is the seat of the Holy Spirit. Thus, indeed, the Holy Spirit is only waiting for his luminous and extraordinary union with Shakti or sexual igneous force that, as a serpent of fire, is dormant and coiled up 3.5 times within the lowest of the 7 centers. The objective of yoga is to acquire liberation with this splendid union. However, another thing is to analyze, to experiment and to comprehend the marvelous analytical studies of the laboratorium oratorium of the 3rd logos. We have already stated, yet we repeat again, that the sacred fire has 7 degrees of power. There are 7 serpents, 2 groups of 3 plus the sublime coronation of the 7th tongue of fire that unites us with the One, with the Law, with the Father. It is urgent to know that the 7 serpents are the 7 rungs of Jacob's ladder, the 7 gates of the voice of the silence. The 2 first serpents, the serpent of the physical body and the serpent of the vital body, only reach the magnetic field at the root of the nose after having placed into activity the lotus of 1,000 petals. However, the 5 remaining superior serpents always reach the cardias through the Amrita Nadi. No one can pass through the 7 initiatic gates in an instantaneous and simultaneous way. No initiate can jump to the 7th rung immediately. Degrees and degrees exist in all of this. Whosoever wants to lift the 3rd serpent must first of all lift the 2nd, and no one can lift the 2nd serpent without having previously lifted the 1st. It is an absurdity to try to lift the 4th sacred serpent without having previously lifted the 3rd, and it is stubbornness to intend to lift the 5th serpent without previously having lifted the 4th. Thousands of pseudo-esoteric and pseudo-occultist students commit the embarrassing error of believing that one can achieve the revolutionary development of the Kundalini by working with the bellow system. In limbo there live many yogis who, in spite of having practiced pranayama intensely during their entire lives, have not even achieved the awakening of their kundalini. With the respiratory exercises, we can raise some igneous flames through the spinal medulla, but we will never achieve the ascension of each one of the noble serpents of fire with such practices. Undoubtedly, it is very recommendable to utilize those flames of sacred fire that are enclosed within the Muladhara chakra for the awakening of the consciousness. However, this does not signify the awakening of the kundalini. By all means, it is clear that the nostrils are connected to the sexual gonads through Ida and Pingla. This is why it is relatively easy to utilize certain sacred flames for the awakening of the consciousness by means of the respiratory exercises. The best initiates of Laya Yoga, Zen, and Chan intelligently combine meditation with pranayama when comprehending the urgent necessity of awakening the consciousness. When a minute fraction of vital energy travels through the length of a nervous fiber and provokes reactions in certain centers, it is perceived as a dream or as imagination. However, when under the effects of pranayama, in combination with meditation, any minute fraction of sacred fire achieves to rise through the medullary canal. The reaction of such centers is formidable, immensely superior to that of a dream or imagination. Any minute fraction of the reserve of Kundalini becomes formidable for the awakening of the consciousness. Therefore, it is, by all means, marvelous to combine meditation with respiratory exercises. Meditation combined with pranayama serves for the awakening of the consciousness. However, they will never serve for the awakening of the Kundalini. Some mystics achieve the ascension of some sacred flames throughout the medullary canal by means of prayer and meditation. However, this does not signify the awakening of the Kundalini. Any given fraction of the Kundalini can produce illumination during prayer and meditation. Nonetheless, this does not signify the awakening of the Kundalini. There exist many formidable mantras for the awakening of the Kundalini. However, these only take effect if they are chanted in the ninth sphere during the Maithuna, sexual magic. At this moment, that formidable mantra that the angel Arak, angel of command, taught me comes into my memory. Kandil, Bandil, RRR. This mantric song is sung as follows. Khan is sung with a resounding voice and Dil with a decreasing voice. Bon is sung with a resounding voice and Dil with a decreasing voice. The letter RRR is rolled. It should be vocalized as if imitating the sound of a high-pitched motor, but with the sweetness of a child's voice. This is one of the most powerful mantras of sexual magic. Thus, every Gnostic alchemist must chant it during Maithuna. The canals of Ida and Pingla can and must be purified with pranayama. The sexual energies can be sublimated with pranayama. Nevertheless, one cannot awaken the Kundalini with pranayama, because the Kundalini only enters into activity with the sexual contact of the positive and negative, masculine and feminine polarities during the sexual act. We find many things on this planet. This is why, for the limit of all absurdities, there exist certain stubborn people who believe that because within every human being there exists two polarities, one can, according to these stubborn people, awaken the Kundalini without the need of Maithuna. These dim-witted people should give unto women, as a gift, the formula to conceive children without the necessity of a sperm, without the necessity of sexual contact. These foolish people should give away to men the clue on how to engender children without the necessity of a woman's ovum. Chapter 26. Black Tantrism. Within the perpetual snow of the millenarian Tibet, frill of so many traditions, there exist diverse black tantric schools. Miserable will be the one who affiliates himself to those tenebrous schools. It was better for him that a millstone was hanged about his neck and be cast into the sea. Luke 17 verse 2. The fundamental basic objective of the black tantric schools is the development of the abominable Kundartagwaiter organ, tail of Satan. White sexual yoga teaches that the igneous serpent of our magical powers awakens with the contact of the solar and lunar atoms of the seminal system in the Triveni, close to the coccyx, in order to initiate its march inward and upward through the medullary canal. However, the black yogis from the clan of Dagdugpa never performed the contact of the solar and lunar atoms inside the organism. they always do it outside the organism. These black yogis, Ajura Samphita, commit the crime of ejaculating the semen, Shura, during the Mithuna. They do this in order to mix their semen with feminine Raja. Thus, this is how they achieve the contact of the solar and lunar atoms within the same woman's yoni. Undoubtedly, the most difficult for these red hat bones and dugpa is the reabsorbing of the seminal liquid after having ejaculated it. A certain terribly malignant psychic type of force exists in this reabsorbing process. Incorrectly applied, the Vajroli Madra, in combination with their mental force, allows these red hat bones and dugpas to absorb their spilled seminal liquor through their urethra. During the ordinal, sexual contact, the intellectual animal spills millions of solar atoms of very high voltage. These are immediately replaced by billions of satanic atoms from the secret enemy, and these are collected from within the atomic infernos of the human being by means of the process of contraction, orgasm, of the sexual organs after the coitus. When the semen is not spilled, then the solar atoms return inward and upward through Ida and Pingla. Then the solar atoms extraordinarily multiply in quantity and quality. However, the spilled semen, which the black tantras reabsorb through their urethra by extracting it from within the vagina, in fact, has already converted itself into a frightful accumulator of satanic atoms. When these types of abnormal satanic atoms intend to rise up to the Golgotha of the father, the brain, they violently are cast down against the coccyx by the three akashic breaths that work in Ida, Pingla, and Shashamna. These types of seminal malignant atoms are precipitated through Ida and Pingla. The abominable Kundartagwaiter organ into activity. Within any ordinary person, the igneous serpent of our magical powers remains enclosed within the coccygeal center. It is coiled up in a marvelous way 3.5 times. We convert ourselves into angels when the serpent rises through the medullary canal. However, we convert ourselves into terribly malignant lunar demons when the serpent descends, when the serpent precipitates from the coccyx downwards into the atomic infernos of the human being. The rising serpent is the Kundalini. The falling serpent is the abominable Kundartagwaiter organ. When the serpent is rising throughout the medullary canal, it is the bronze serpent that healed the Israelites in the wilderness. Yet, the falling serpent is the tempting serpent of Eden, the terrible serpent python with 7 heads which was writhing in the mud of the earth and which Apollo furiously hurt with his darts. The abominable Kundartagwaiter organ confers onto the black tantric magicians terribly malignant psychic powers, siddhis. The abominable Kundartagwaiter organ can never open the 7 apocalyptic churches of the Book of Revelation, which are the 7 vital centers of the dorsal spine, because it can never succeed in rising through the medullary canal. However, the abominable Kundartagwaiter organ can place the antithesis of the 7 churches into activity. The antitheses are 7 malignant centers or 7 tenebrous chakras of the lower abdomen. Muslims affirm that the inferno has 7 gates and that these exist in the lower abdomen. The abominable Kundartagwaiter organ has the power of opening those 7 gates. To develop the abominable Kundartagwaiter organ and to place into activity the 7 infernal chakras of the lower abdomen is in fact equivalent to converting ourselves into that filthy beast with 7 heads and 10 horns upon which the great harlot, humanity, whose number is 666, is seated. Those who commit the crime of developing the abominable Kundartagwaiter organ divorce themselves from their immortal spiritual triad and sink forever into the infernal worlds. Kundalini is a compound word. Kunda reminds us of the abominable Kundartagwaiter organ, and Lini is indeed an Atlantean word which signifies ended. Therefore, the Pentecostal fire rising through the medullary canal signifies that the abominable Kundartagwaiter organ comes to an end. The fire of the Holy Spirit ascending throughout the medullary canal opens the church of Ephesus, coccygeal chakra, opens the church of Smyrna, prostatic or uterine chakra, opens the church Pergamus, umbilical chakra, opens the church of Thyatira, chakra of the heart, opens the church of Sardis, laryngeal chakra, opens the church of Philadelphia, frontal chakra, opens the church of Laodicea, lotus of 1000. petals, and the abominable Kundardaguator organ comes to an end. In fact, the damned serpent, the Luciferic fire, the tail of Satan, opens the 7 antithetic infernal churches from the lower abdomen. The ascending fire confers onto the innermost, the spirit, powers over Prithvi, the element earth, in the church of Ephesus. It confers powers over Apas, the water, in the church of Smyrna. It confers power over Tejas, the fire, in the church of Pergamus. It confers power over Vayu, the air, in the church of Thyatira. It confers power over Akash, the ether, in the church of Sardis. It confers power over the light with the eye of Shiva in the church of Philadelphia, and it confers the union with the innermost in the church of Laodicea. Even when the abominable Kundardaguator organ, the descending fire, gives the black yogi certain cities, magical powers intimately related with the 7 infernal chakras from the lower abdomen, it also converts him into an inhabitant of the subterranean world, into a slave of the elements. In the Western world, the left-handed adepts have established many schools of black tantrism. Such tenebrous organizations display sublime titles. We know the case of a certain great initiate who founded a school of white tantrism before disincarnating. Unfortunately, he committed the mistake of leaving his son, an inexperienced young man, as general director. Thus, this naive youngster, without any true esoteric experience, soon allowed himself to be cheated by certain black tantric adepts and concluded by publicly teaching black tantrism. The outcome of all of this was frightful, because some members of this brotherhood, also inexperienced, accepted the black tantric teachings and ended up converting themselves into terribly malignant demons. Sex is a stone of stumbling and a rock of falling. Sex is a chief cornerstone, elect, precious. We must never forget the words of Peter, the master of Methuna. Peter warned us against the false prophets and false masters, who in disguise and with sublime and ineffable false appearances, introduce many destructive heresies, much black tantrism and pernicious practices. Follow, beloved Gnostic brethren, the straight path, the path of perfect chastity, the path of absolute sanctity and great sacrifice for our fellow men. Chapter 27. Grey Tantrism. If we carefully observe the symbolic caduceus of Mercury, we will discover with mystic astonishment that the 2 serpents that are entwined around its holy pole form the Holy 8. Ida and Pingla entwined around the dorsal spine are indeed the perfect 8. Joyful be the one who comprehends the profound mysteries of the Holy 8. The number 8 placed horizontally is the sign of the infinite. The 8 has the image of a clepsydra. The succession of time in different cycles can be indicated with the 8. Each cycle, or circle of the number 8, is without a doubt the continuation of the other. The spiral of life exists within the Holy 8. The evolving and devolving processes are always performed in a spiral form. The fire of Phlegethon and the water of Acheron cross within the 9th sphere, forming the symbol of the infinite. The double current with which one must work in the great work, in order to attain the intimate self-realization, is wisely represented in the mysterious 8th key of Basil Valentine. This is a variation of the caduceus, and naturally it symbolizes the Mercury of secret philosophy. The marvelous properties of sulfur and the productive fecundity of salt are united extraordinarily within this Mercury. Thus, this is how the mystical connubial of 2 luminaries is performed in 3 worlds. The world and the superworld are marvelously entwined with the Holy 8. The underworld and the world are entwined with the Holy 8. The superior circle of the Holy 8 is a living representation of the human brain. The inferior circle is hidden with the mystery, in order to symbolize the cup of Hermes within which the Mercury of secret philosophy, the ens seminis, is contained. It has been wisely stated unto us that the temple heart is precisely situated at the point where the fire of Phlegethon and the water of Acheron cross, forming the sign of the infinite. The struggle is terrible, brain against sex, sex against brain, and the most terrible is that of heart against heart. You know this. The sign of the infinite within which the brain, heart, and sex of the genie of the earth is represented, is discovered by every esoterist within the interior of the planetary globe in the 9th circle. The bodies of all creatures which live upon the earth, from the most insignificant microbe until the human being are found organized upon this archetypical base of the Holy Eight. The Eight Kabirs, those powerful Semitic, ineffable and terribly divine gods, who were later worshipped by the Greeks and Romans and whose principal sanctuary was found always in Samothrace, are intimately related with the Holy Eight, with the sacred symbol of the infinite. The Eight Kabirs are the children of Ephesus or Vulcan with one adorable daughter from Proteus. They were born from the sacred fire that manifests itself within the terrible profundities of the earth, by the forging action of Proteus upon that universal substance that naturally has the property of taking any form. These Eight Kabirs are the fundamental intelligences of this nature. They are the extraordinary regents of the great mysteries of life and death. According to a very ancient esoteric tradition, one of those Eight Kabirs was assassinated by one of his own brothers. However, later on he was resuscitated with the help of Hermes. This reminds us of the symbolic death and resurrection of Hiram, Osiris, and Jesus that must be comprehended in depth by the M.M. The Holy Eight is therefore the base and the living foundation of the great work. If someone violates the scientific rules and principles contained within the symbol of the infinite, they will totally fail in the great work. Whosoever wants to successfully work in the magisterium of fire must never spill the cup of Hermes, must not spill the semen, because they will fail in the great work. The double current of fire and water must be exactly crossed in the ninth sphere in order to form the symbol of the infinite. If the alchemist loses the water, meaning if the alchemist commits the error of ejaculating the semen, then the crossing of the two currents is impossible. In the hard battle of brain against sex and sex against brain, the brain loses the battle most of the time. The intimate battles of the heart usually lead the alchemists towards final failure. A Greek fable tells us the tale of Sisyphus the Colossus, who by carrying a big boulder on his back intends once again to reach the summit of the mountain. However, his attempts always fail because just when he is about to place the stone at the right point of his desired goal, the stone always falls into the depths of the precipice. Whosoever spills the cup of Hermes once in a while, whosoever at times does not spill the semen, and then later comes to spill it, violates the law of the Holy Kabirs and converts himself into a grey tantric adept. In this world of samsara, there exist evasiveness and false justifications for many things. Thus, this is how grey tantrism also has its followers and its doctrine. Any esoterist traveler who himself proposes to perform an in-depth investigation among the secret schools of the Asiatic continent will verify for himself the crude and painful reality of grey tantrism. Tantrism exists in all of Asia and is very abundant in the diverse schools of Theravada, Hinayana, Mahayana, Chan, Zen, Tantric Buddhism, etc. The intellectual animals always find evasiveness and false justification for all of their weaknesses. Therefore, it does not surprise us that even within these self-exalted and dignified schools of Zen, Tantric Buddhism, and others, much ballast of grey tantrism is found. It is lamentable that many disoriented instructors, from those Oriental schools, offer valuable sexual yoga techniques and practices without ever comprehending the fundamental aspect of tantrism, that being the urgent necessity of never committing the crime of spilling the semen during your whole life. To prolong the coitus with the sole objective of enjoying animalistic pleasure and without any regard for seminal ejaculation is undoubtedly grey tantrism that can easily degenerate into black tantrism. Fortunately, there exists a lot of white tantrism in Taoism, in the Hindu and Tibetan tantrism, in the Zen Puro, and in the original Chan. Some sects of Persian origin existed in Old Europe, such as the famous Manichaeans, who practiced white tantrism or coitus interruptus. They called it karetsa, which is a word that has Persian origins. The medieval knights also practiced white sexual magic in the Donoi. The alchemists who work with all the principles and laws of the Holy Eight self-realize in depth, and they convert themselves into hierophants. Every authentic esoterist knows very well that the symbol of the infinite is equal to the pentalpha, the famous star of 5 points. Every esoterist knows very well that the 8 Kabirs are found intimately related with the 8 winds. Boreas, the wind of the north, was considered a raptor of youngsters. Nodo or Ostro, the wind of the south, dragged the tempests and the clouds. Saphiro, the wind of the west of the world, was venerated as the god of spring. Euro or Volturno, at times dry, at times humid, was always venerated in winter. Ancient sages never forgot Cishias the Greek, the famous, the northeastern wind. The ancient hierophants also never forgot Apollites, the southeastern wind. Neither had they forgotten Lips, the southwestern wind, nor Skyron, the northwestern wind. The work with the philosophical stone, the 8 steps of yoga, are exclusively for those who respect the principles and laws of the Holy Eight and never those of the henchmen of black or gray tantrism. Chapter 28. Sexual Abstention. Esoteric investigations performed in my astral body have allowed me to verify that those people who renounce sex, without having previously worked in the magisterium of fire, without having achieved the second birth, charge themselves with terribly malignant poison-inioscirian vibrations. It is urgent to know, it is necessary to comprehend, that these unusual types of pernicious vibrations, after having totally saturated the lunar bodies, have the power of awakening the abominable Kundartagwaiter organ. Any abstinent person already poisoned by these types of poison-inioscirian vibrations characterizes himself by a fatal dualism of expert cynicism and a high degree of fanaticism. Within the infernal worlds live many mistaken ascetics, many abstinent people who have renounced sex without previously having built the solar bodies in the 9th sphere, without having previously reached the second birth. The path that leads into the abyss is paved with good intentions. The Averno is filled with mistaken but sincere people. Within this painful planet on which we live, there exist many asleep pseudo-esoteric and pseudo-occultist people who dream that they have awakened. Meanwhile, they do not comprehend that they are trapped within the dream of their consciousness's pause and that many shadows of vengeance are lurking within their interior. Those wretched people, who boast of being illuminated, have renounced sex without having previously worked in the 9th sphere, without having attained the second birth which the Master Jesus spoke about to Nicodemus. The outcome of such absurd sexual abstention is always fatality. Those abstemious people always have their consciousness asleep, because if they would have their consciousness awakened, they could prove by direct experience the tremendous activity of the malignant poison-inioscirian vibrations within their lunar bodies. This is how they would finally see, with an unutterable terror, the frightful development of the abominable Kundartagwaiter organ within their submerged animal nature. Those mistaken but sincere people do not want to comprehend that whosoever wants to ascend, must first of all descend. Mystic pride is a characteristic of the interior Pharisee. These are people who boast of being initiates, saints and wise, who renounce sex without having previously built the solar bodies, without having previously worked in the 9th sphere, without previously reaching the second birth. Then they wind up developing the abominable Kundartagwaiter organ. It is difficult to take these mistaken but sincere people away from their error, since they feel themselves to be super-transcended. They boast about being gods without ever having placed a foot on the first rung of the holy ladder. Certain types of infrasexuals of Lilith damn the third logos. They mortally hate sex. Thus they do not have any problem with applying their wicked qualifications unto sex. Infrasexual people get enraged against the Gnostics because we give special preference to sex. Every infrasexual person boasts about being wise. Thus, as usual, they view the sexually normal people in a very despicable way and they qualify them as inferior people or mistaken people, etc. The great arcanum that is so hated by infrasexual people is found very well hidden between the 2 Masonic columns J and B. The study of the sacred novenary always concludes with the pointed cubic stone, which in itself unites, on its 9 marvelous sides, the entire perfection of the cube and the equilibrated elevation of the pyramid with a quadrangular base. By intelligently opening the sacred philosophical stone and by extending its marvelous and splendid faces, then, with mystical astonishment, we obtain twice the sacred symbol of the Holy Cross. The union of the 2 crosses is the perfect expression of the magisterium of fire. The first cross is formed with the 5 square sides which are constituted by the 4 faces plus the bottom face of the stone, and the second cross by the 4 triangles of its pyramidal vertex. Every true initiate knows very well that the first quadrilateral cross symbolizes nature with its four elements that are developed as crystallizations of Akash, Miloprakriti, or universal ens seminis. It has been wisely stated to us that the second cross, formed by the four ternaries or splendid esoteric triangles which emanate from a center or original point, is the esoteric cross, a living expression of the triune logos that is crucified in the matter. Upon this living stone of the temple situated between the columns of Adam Kadmon, plus ultra is found, the clue of the intimate self-realization. The philosophical stone is sex. It is the cubic stone of Yesod. Therefore, it is dumb to want to convert ourselves into a column of the temple of the living God, without previously having chiseled the brute stone. In other words, no one can attain the mastery, the adepthood, without having previously worked in the ninth sphere. The pointed cubic stone has 9 faces, 9 vertexes, and 16 edges. The pointed cubic stone is telling us that every elevation requires a previous humiliation. Firstly, it is essential to descend into the infernal worlds, into the ninth circle, under the surface of the earth, in order to have the right to ascend into heaven. It is impossible to enter into the kingdom if the laws of the cubic stone of Yesod are violated. Those who renounce sex, without having previously attained the second birth, violate the laws of the holy stone. The innocent souls who live on the other shore of the evil river, those sublime mystics, those venerable sages, those patriarchs who live within limbo for the crime of having renounced sex, without having previously built the solar bodies, avoided the poisoninioscurian vibrations behind the protective shield of their sate, is stupid to renounce sex without having previously achieved the second birth. It is absurd to violate the laws of the holy stone. The innocent souls of limbo need to reign corporate in order to work in the ninth sphere and attain the second birth. Only then can they enter into the kingdom. Chapter 29. Solar Laws and Lunar Laws. In these times of world crisis, scientific disquietudes are formidable. Already Morrison and Cocconi, eminent North American physicians, think that scientific societies of extraterrestrial human beings, immensely superior to us, may exist in some parts of the Milky Way. The cited physicians believe that it is possible that these extraterrestrials want to communicate with us. They have even discovered that such cosmic corporations emit waves toward our direction at a frequency of 1,420 MC per second. The theory of the plurality of inhabited worlds has already been comprehended by the scholars of science. One argument, among others, which is in favor of this theory is that which states that certain stars have weak angular velocities, such as the Sun. Every scholar of science has verified through observation and experience that the smallness of the angular moment of any sun indicates, denotes, or reveals the existence of a planetary system. Scientists are already starting to comprehend that planets which are located in a similar position to that of the Earth, in relation to our Sun, could be found among all of those millions of worlds within our galaxy. To discard the possibility that some of those planets have civilizations immensely more developed than ours is an absurdity. These scholars state that this possibility can and must be very carefully examined. Certain news stated that Drake, a famous scientist, had the intention of seriously studying the very interesting zone of Seti and Eridano. These two stars are found at a distance of 11.4 light-years, and these are the closest after the one from Centauri. From the formidable list of closest stars, intelligently elaborated upon by Morrison and Cocconi, it is clear that Seti and Eridano as well as Indi are indeed the most interesting after discarding the double stars. It has been verified that because of the very marked perturbed orbits of the planets of the double stars, these planets do not possess uniform climates during very long geologic periods. Gnostics state that many galactic societies exist. These galactic societies know about the critical mode in which we live, and they want and wish to help us. Sirius, the son of the suns of our Milky Way, is a double star. The twin brother of Sirius is a black world of a terrible and frightful density. The vibratory influence of the double star Sirius is very strange. That radiation is supersolar and infralunar. By simple logical deduction, we can state that the double radiation of Sirius decisively influences all of the supraheavens and all of the infernos of the Milky Way. It is true that Sirius is the great sun of the Milky Way, yet, also, it is not any less true that its tenebrous twin brother has a density much more astonishing than even the one that could be conceived within the interior darkness of the deadest moon. The double star Sirius is composed of an immense radiant sun, 26 times more brilliant than ours, with a circular trajectory of a period of 50 years, around a white dwarf, the size of Jupiter and 5,000 times denser than lead. It has been stated onto us that the Milky Way gravitates around the double star Sirius. In a certain way, that double star seems to fill in the excessive gap between the cosmos of the solar system and the Milky Way. The double star Sirius indicates an intense solar and lunar activity within our galaxy. The double star Sirius decisively influences us here and now. To become free of the lunar influence is something frightfully difficult, yet it is indispensable in order to achieve liberation. On this planet in which we live, the lunar influence is double, because the Earth has 2 moons. Through the telescopes, the second moon appears black and is the size of a lentil. Occultists have named the black moon Lilith. This second lunar satellite is a kind of 8th submerged sphere. It is a very malignant world. On Earth, the sinister vibrations that come from the black moon originate many monstrosities, abominations, frightful crimes filled with repugnant savagery, inconceivable lust, homosexuality on a great scale, masturbation, pederasty, provoked abortions, etc. Among the most abominable products of Lilith, it is opportune to cite the case of Count Dracula in Russia. This movie's personage truly existed, and H.P. Blavatsky comments about him in one of her books. This great female master stated that such a count, in times of the Tsars, was the mayor of a certain Russian town. He mortally hated his wife, because vampires are homosexuals, they mortally hate the opposite sex. After his death, Count Dracula presented himself in the house of his abhorred widow in order to lash her violently. At midnight, certain Catholic priests uselessly tried to block Dracula's trot. At the bridge very close to the cemetery, Count Dracula's chariot trampled the priests. When Count Dracula's black and frightful crypt was opened, his living cadaver was found very well preserved and submerged within human blood, since vampires nourish themselves with blood. The great master Helen P. Blavatsky states that the feet of the sinister Kaffir were covered with mud. Without a doubt, this shows us that Dracula was escaping at midnight from his sepulchre. Dracula's case concluded when the priests wounded his heart with a wooden stick. An order of vampires exists in Palestine. They hide themselves behind the following title: Order of the Immortal Guardians of the Holy Sepulchre. Vampires are the outcome of homosexuality in combination with tantrism between persons of the same sex. It is an execrable monstrosity, a frightful abomination. The double lunar influence of this planet on which we live is terribly mechanistic. It is urgent to nourish ourselves with the apples of gold or apples of Freya and with the liquor of soma or biblical manna in order to build the solar bodies and to liberate ourselves from the lunar laws. It has been stated unto us that our physical sun, as Brahman chronologies demonstrate, rotates around a sun that is infinitely greater, or more luminous. Such sun is so luminous, this is why it is invisible before our terrene eyes. Yet it is mentioned in ancient theogonies with an indispensable mathematical rigor. Yet, this equatorial or astral sun, which is the unknowable center from which our physical sun is just a mere planet, is not the only one that exists. But moreover, 2 others, more excelsior suns still exist within the superior planes or hyperdimensions of this cerulean space. The Tamil calendars, like the Tirachanga and Panchanga, call these suns, respectively, the polar sun, or galactic center of our entire nebula with its 100 million suns, and the central sun, the center of centers, which in turn entwine and unify as many nebulae, of millions and millions of suns, that could exist in the millions within the sky. Before the eyes of a mystic, the astral or equatorial sun flamingly shines, assembled in the celestial group which we call the Pleiades or 7 sisters from the constellation of Taurus. Sirius, with its whole magnificence, is the gravitational center of this Milky Way. However, it has to gravitate around the polar sun. The cosmic order would be impossible without the central sun. Variety is unity. The central sun unifies, governs, and establishes a unity within the infinite variety. Chapter 30. The Astral Body. Within occultist literature, a great deal has been written regarding this very interesting theme of astral projection. Here, it is very opportune to cite the undesirable hypnotic phenomena of the mentioned Laurent, July 10, 1894, in which the famous hypnotist Colonel Roches experimented with hypnotism. He achieved with lamentable imprudence, like those who despise the classic Ars Magna Brevis Experimentum Periculosum, what can be summarized as hypnotic states separated amongst themselves by many other lethargic states. People who are dedicated to this subject matter know all this very well. On to the three typical hypnotic states known as lethargy, catalepsy, and somnambulism. Colonel Roches added many other more profound states. 13 in all. These states were separated amongst themselves by successive lethargic states in which the patient seems to sleep more and more, in order to successively awaken into new states each time more distant from the state of vigil. In state number 5, a blue phantom appears on the left side of the hypnotized patient. Likewise, in state number 6, on the patient's left side another phantom appears but red. Then, upon reaching state number 7, both phantoms unite and become one and co-penetrate into irregular white-violet bands when reaching state number 8. In state number 9, the astral double, thus integrated, starts to enhance a relative liberty of movements. Although without severing the silver cord which connects to the physical body, since the rupture of such a cord would signify death. In hypnotic state number 11, according to the sayings of Colonel Roches, the astral double tends to its emancipation, to become totally released from its physical ties, while some certain repugnant forms or diabolic eyes viscously move in and out of the double, producing terrible convulsions within the patient. Now that we have reached this section of this chapter, it is convenient to clarify that Colonel Roches qualified the demonic of the patient as repugnant larvae. When the unhappy patient sees himself assaulted by such animalistic creatures, each time increasing in number, he feels the loss of his vital forces and anguishly asks to be awakened and thus liberated from such a nightmare. This is state number 12. State number 13 is definitive. The hypnotized patient is totally released from his physical ties, thus, he freely travels within the superior dimensions of space. It is clearly comprehensible that all of these hypnotic experiments are criminal in their depth. The hypnotist in this case is similar to a pitiless vivisectionist that with his bit of intelligence boasts about being wise and tortures poor animals in order to discover the enigmas of nature. The only difference is that in the hypnotic experiment of our narration, the guinea pig is the unhappy hypnotized patient. The universal Christian Gnostic movement teaches practical and effective systems in order to separate the double from the physical body at will and to consciously travel with the double without harmful and detrimental hypnotic trances. The wise law of contrary analogies invites us to comprehend that if 13 subjective and negative states exist during a hypnotic state for the projection of the double, likewise, another 13 objective and positive states also exist during a healthy and natural projection of the double. It is urgent to comprehend that whosoever wants to learn how to consciously travel within the double, the first thing that he needs to do is to awaken his consciousness. Read chapter 11. Astral projection is no longer a problem when the consciousness awakens. Sacred scriptures insist on the necessity of awakening, but people continue with their consciousness asleep. The time has arrived in which we have to comprehend that the double, which was registered in some photographic films and which was analyzed by the Colonel Roches, is not the true astral body. The double has been, is, and shall always be of a molecular, lunar, and protoplasmic nature. The astral body is a body of an electronic, solar nature. The astral solar body has nothing vague, vaporous, or subjective. The astral solar body is a body of bones and flesh. It is made out of the flesh from paradise, not from the flesh that comes from Adam. Ordinary human beings, except those very few rare cases, are always born with the famous lunar double and never with the solar astral body. The wretched intellectual beast possesses the molecular body or body of desires or lunar double. He does not have a solar astral body. He must build the solar astral body. Intellectual animals live inside their physical body, yet, during normal sleep and also after death, they live outside of it. Thus, when outside of their physical bodies, they wander around dressed with their molecular double. Pseudo-esoteric and pseudo-occultist people have named the molecular body astral body. Nonetheless, such molecular body is not the astral body. The so-called incorporeal travels are always performed with the lunar double. After having released its physical ties, it can freely travel through the whole Milky Way without any danger. Any monk can develop the superior emotional center, and if he is really self-determined, he can eliminate, from his interior nature, his lower desires and animal passions. Nevertheless, this is not how one builds the astral body. This issue related with the building of the astral body has been, is, and shall always be an absolutely sexual problem. An occultist maxim exists those states, as above so below. We can also state, as below so above. If sexual union of the phallus and the uterus is always necessary in order to engender a physical body, then it is also absolutely logical to state that the sexual act is indispensably necessary in order to engender the solar astral body. Once in a while within this complicated and difficult labyrinth of pseudo-esotericism and pseudo-occultism, some wandering degenerated infrasexual might appear who will possibly state that the astral body can be built without the necessity of the sexual act because we already have the two poles, masculine and feminine. Those imbecile ignoramuses do not want to comprehend that the time of the Lemurian hermaphrodites has already passed, and that creation without sexual cooperation, without the necessity of the sexual act between man and woman, can only be performed by an authentic hermaphrodite. The Lemurian hermaphrodites had the phallus and the uterus and also all of the male and female organs totally developed. This is why they could create or reproduce themselves without the necessity of the sexual act. However, all of the pseudo-esoteric and pseudo-occultist people who hate sexual magic have never demonstrated unto us that they have the male and female sexual organs totally developed. What is as abundant as evil weed in this perverse, corrupted and doomed Aryan civilization are the false hermaphrodites, meaning the homosexuals of Lilith, the gays. The sexual hydrogen is developed within the human organism according to the musical scale do re mi fa sol la ti. The sexual hydrogen T12 is very abundant in the semen. This type of hydrogen crystallizes into new human bodies, and when it is wisely transmuted, it takes form within the astral body. By restraining the sexual impulse in order to avoid the ejaculation of semen, the sexual hydrogen T12 receives a special shock that passes it into another second superior octave. This new octave is processed according to the 7 notes of the scale do re mi fa sol la ti. An occultist must never ignore that the transformation of the substances within the human organism is processed according to the law of the octaves. The union of the sexual hydrogens 11 to 12, from a male and female and everything that accompany these two unities, allows us to pass the sexual hydrogen into another second superior octave, whose outcome is the crystallization of the mentioned hydrogen into the marvelous form that is the astral body. Such body of perfection is born of the same material, of the same substance, of the same matter from which the physical body is born. Indeed, this is what the transmutation of lead into gold is, in other words, the transmutation of the physical body into the astral body. Any organism needs its nourishment, and the astral body is no exception. The nourishment of this body of gold is hydrogen 24. Chapter 31. The Mental Body. In his great work entitled Critique of Pure Reasoning, Immanuel Kant, the great German philosopher, demonstrated the possibility of a transcendental logic. The formulae of a transcendental superior logic, that in itself has the power of opening the doors of mystery, were delivered on to humanity written within the Hindustani sacred scriptures many centuries before Bacon and Aristotle. Esoteric philosophy never believed in the infallibility and totalitarian omnipotence of Aristotle's logic. It is necessary to comprehend, it is urgent to know, that superior logic existed before the deductive and inductive methods were formulated. Transcendental logic is the logic of intuition, the logic of the infinite, and the logic of ecstasy. Every esoteric investigator can find superior logic in the works of Plotino. In that precious study which deals with intelligible beauty, Peter Ouspensky stated, "I have called tertium organum onto this system of superior logic, because for us, after the canons of Bacon and Aristotle, it is the third canon or third instrument of thought. The first was the organon and the second the novum organum. However, before the first canon, the third already existed. It is clearly comprehensible that a human being who has this clue of the mind in his power can and must open, without any fear, the marvelous door of the world of cosmic causations. Through many years of observation and experience, we have witnessed that authentic ecstasy is processed within mathematical laws and logic. Firstly, let us remember the unity of the mystical experience, which is a very appropriate name. During the state of sacred rapture, all mystics concretely feel something in common, a similar sense and an unmistakable tie of identical character. Secondly, let us consider the very interesting case of mystic languages. By means of a judicious comparative study of religions, we have verified that mystics from different epochs speak the same esoteric language and use the same words. Without a doubt, this demonstrates to us the tremendous reality of mystical experiences. Thirdly, let us mention the astonishing concordance of the data that in a very intimate way connects mystical experiences with the intrinsic conditions of the world. From such conditions we can correctly identify the following: sensation of the unity of the whole, time a very particular new sensation, the sensation of infinitude, pleasure or horror, the integral knowledge of the whole in one part, and finally the unforgettable experience of infinite life and infinite consciousness. The reactionary, regressive, and retarded types of people who have their minds bottled up within formal logic and who have never bothered to study superior logic behave like true asses when they try to interpret an esoteric book. Intellectual scoundrels reject the mystical experience because they cannot bottle up the latter within their formal logic. The gravest of all of this is that these know-it-alls of reactionary logic not only ignore all this, but moreover, they ignore that they ignore. To qualify the data of mystical experiences is illogical indeed, and is the breaking point of ignorance. The pure esotericism is based upon the mystical experience, and the latter is submitted to mathematics of transfinite numbers and to the unmistakable laws of superior logic. We studied the astral body in the former chapter. The complete manifestation of our superior emotional center takes place through the astral body. In this present chapter it is necessary to comprehend what the mental body is, what the mind is, what superior logic is. The complete development of our superior mental center can be achieved only through a legitimately solar type of mental body. Ordinary people only have lunar mental bodies. Such a protoplasmic body is of an animal nature. The inferior manas or concrete mind about which Theosophy speaks so abundantly about is only the lunar mind. The fact that the intellectual animal has an animal mind is not a marvel, since the irrational beasts also have it. What happened is that the latter never gave an intellectual form to their minds. That is the only difference. If we truly want to think with a Christ mind, with superior logic, with the intelligence of a Gnostic Arhat, it is indispensable to build the mental body. By restraining the sexual impulse, in order to avoid the ejaculation of semen, the sexual hydrogen T12 receives a second special shock which in fact passes into a third superior octave, which is then processed according to the 7 notes of the musical scale do re mi fa sol la ti. The crystallization of the sexual hydrogen T12 in the splendid form of the solar mental body is performed in accordance with the wise law of musical octaves. It is impossible to build the solar mental body without the 7 notes of the third scale. The yogi who has never practiced Maithuna can convert himself into a true athlete of mental concentration. Nevertheless, he will never build the solar mental body with pranayamas or mental exercises, because this has been and always shall be a 100% sexual problem. The authentic and legitimate solar mental body is a body of paradise, a body of happiness filled with incalculable perfections. People who suppose that the solar mental body is a vague, vaporous, and fluidic etc. body are lamentably mistaken. The solar mental body is also an organism of bones and flesh, the flesh of paradise. It is flesh that does not come from Adam. The solar mental body is born from the sexual act without the ejaculation of the ens seminis, and it also needs nourishment and development. The mental solar body is nourished with hydrogen-12. The solar mental body has 300,000 clans or magnetic centers, and all of them must vibrate within the same tone, and without even a hint of arrhythmia. Those initiates who possess solar mental bodies always think with superior logic, with transcendental logic. By taking the axioms of Aristotle as a model, we can intelligently express the principal axiom of superior logic in the following way. A is as much A as it is not A. Everything is as much A as it is not A. Everything is everything. The logical formula, A is as much A as it is not A, corresponds to the formula of transfinite mathematics that states, a magnitude can be bigger or smaller than itself. After reading the above lines, intellectual scoundrels, who are bottled up within formal logic, will qualify these formulae with despise and will state that these are illogical and absurd. People with lunar minds are incapable of comprehending the superior logic of solar men. Now, beloved reader, you will comprehend the motive of why intellectual scoundrels become true asses when they try to interpret ancient theogonies. The lunar mind is a true ass upon which we have to ride, if what we truly want is to victoriously enter into heavenly Jerusalem on Palm Sunday. Chapter 32. The Causal Body. Through this chapter we are arriving at the causal world, at the marvelous world of conscious will, in the electronic region. There below, in the molecular world, on the other shore across the evil river. A saddened place exists not for martyrdoms but for sighs, with lamentations and loud moans, resounding through the air that forever whirls around through darkness. There in that limbo of the molecular world, lives Virgil the poet of Mantua, the master of Dante. There also live all of those pseudo-esoteric and pseudo-occultist, naively innocent souls who were not washed of their original sin and who believed that they could self-realize in depth without the need of working with the Methuna in the ninth sphere. Those naive souls committed the mistake of not getting dressed with the three holy virtues, the three solar bodies, astral, mental, and causal. In former chapters, we studied the astral and mental solar bodies. Now we are going to study the body of conscious will, the causal body. Gnostic students need to have a lot of faith and be very well cloaked with the three holy virtues, if indeed they do not want to continue in limbo. Oriental fakirs fight in a frightful way within themselves in order to develop the force of willpower. The entire fakir's path consists of multiple, incredible, and difficult physical practices. Any fakir is very capable of adopting any difficult physical position while keeping his body steady for hours, months, and even years. Or he can sit under a tree on top of an anthill or under the scorching rays of the tropical sun. Any fakir is very capable of sitting on a bare stone under the sun with his arms opened in the form of a cross, or amongst thorns and caltrops for entire months or years. Indeed, fakirs develop the force of willpower in a severe way by means of all of these physical tortures. Nevertheless, they do not achieve the creation of the body of conscious will, causal body, because this is a 100% sexual problem. If the body of conscious will, causal body, could be built with the physical tortures of fakirs, then, according to the law of correspondences and analogies and in obedience to the Hermetic maxim that states, as above so below, we would also have to state that the body of bones and flesh, the physical body, can also be built with such practices. Consequently, the sexual act of father and mother would be superseded. Therefore, to affirm such an absurdity would be the lamentable consequence of a mistaken idea. The body of conscious will, causal body, can only be built within the flaming forge of Vulcan. We can and must give on to the sexual hydrogen T12, by means of Methuna in the ninth sphere, a very special third shock in order to pass it into the fourth superior octave of Do Re Mi Fa Sol La Ti. The crystallization of the sexual hydrogen T12 into the extraordinary form of the causal body, body of conscious will, is performed in accordance with the 7 notes of the scale. The solar astral body is born in the 3rd initiation of fire. The solar mental body is born in the 4th initiation of fire. The causal body, or body of conscious will, is born in the 5th initiation of fire. To possess a causal body, or body of conscious will, is equivalent to converting oneself into a Mahatma, into an adept of the White Lodge. The 1st initiation of fire occurs when the serpent of the physical body makes contact with the atom of the father at the magnetic field located in the root of the nose. The 2nd initiation of fire occurs when the serpent of the vital body makes contact with the atom of the father at the magnetic field located in the root of the nose. The 3rd initiation of fire occurs when the serpent of the astral body reaches the 3rd chamber of the heart, after having passed through the Amrita Nadi. The advent of the 4th initiation of fire occurs when the serpent of the mental body reaches the 4th secret chamber of the heart, after having passed from the brain into the cardias through the Amrita Nadi. The 5th initiation is a marvelous cosmic event that occurs when the 5th serpent, the serpent of the causal body, reaches the 5th esoteric chamber of the cardias after having reached the brain. The 5th cosmic festival is splendid. The newborn causal child is carried on the chariot of the centuries into the temple. For this glorious event, the altar is covered with Veronica's sacred shroud, upon which the divine rostrum crowned with thorns is resplendently shown. Veronica's sacred shroud represents Christ's will, the body of conscious will. The will of Christ can only perform the will of the Father on earth as it is in heaven. Father, if it is possible, pass this chalice away from me, but not my will, but thine be done. Amidst the archaic ruins of the age of bronze, many heads crowned with crowns of thorns have been found, chiseled upon living rocks. The figure of Ecce Homo has a crown not only to remind us of the historical event related with the martyrdom of our adorable Jesus Christ, but also to indicate the necessity of building the solar body of the Christ will. It is urgent to know, it is necessary to comprehend, that the causal body is an ineffable organism that also needs food for its nourishment and development. The nourishment of the causal body, or body of the conscious will, is hydrogen 6. A lot has been written about the 4 bodies: physical, astral, mental, and causal. Some people have written to me and have asked why we did not mention the lingam sarira, vital body. My answer to these people is always the same. The vital body is only the superior section of the physical body, and therefore, in esotericism, the vital body is considered one with the cellular body. Inexpert clairvoyants confuse the lunar bodies with the solar bodies. They even commit the mistake of believing that the wretched intellectual beast, mistakenly called a human being, already has a perfect septenary constitution. It is lamentable that inexpert clairvoyants confuse the Buddhata, which is deposited within the lunar protoplasmic bodies, with the authentic and genuine causal body or solar body of the conscious will. The Buddhata or essence is only a fraction of the human soul within us. Therefore, to confuse the Buddhata or essence with the causal body is an absurdity. On a certain occasion, at the table of a banquet, my real being, the innermost, took a seat with 2 other people. The first was my Buddhi, my Valkyrie, the other person was me, myself, the human soul dressed with the causal body. My Lord took the floor and said, I have 2 souls. The first is Buddhi, the spiritual soul, and it is feminine. The second is the human soul, and it is masculine. The human soul is the soul who works. Thus, while the human soul works, the spiritual soul plays. This is my doctrine. This lesson was taught onto me by my real being Samael in the causal world or world of conscious will. Chapter 33. The Second Birth. In our former chapter we stated that the being, the innermost, the divine spirit of each living creature has 2 souls, Buddhi and superior Manas. The being himself is Atman, the ineffable. If we commit the error of giving the being the qualifications of superior I, alter ego, subliminal I, or divine ego, etc., we commit blasphemy, because that which is divine, the reality, can never fall into the heresy of separability. Superior and inferior are 2 sections of the same thing. Superior I or inferior I are 2 sections of the same pluralized ego, Satan. The being is the being, and the reason for the being to be is to be the same being. The being transcends the personality, the I and individuality. Atman, the being, rends himself asunder into Buddhi and Manas. Buddhi is our Valkyrie, our divine spouse, the Beatrice of Dante, the spiritual soul. Manas, the superior Manas, mistakenly called causal ego in theosophy, is the human soul, the eternal spouse of Valkyrie. Buddhi and Manas are indeed the two twin souls, the two fish of the zodiacal sign of Pisces within the profound waters of eternal mother space. The opposites masculine-feminine are conciliated within the monad in order to form the immortal triad Atman Buddhi Manas. The immortal triad of any lunar creature is not incarnated. That triad lives freely within the Milky Way, yet it is connected to the physical body through the famous Antakarana, the thread of life, the silver cord. The wretched intellectual animal, mistakenly called a human being, only possesses a fraction of the human soul within his protoplasmic lunar bodies. Unfortunately, that fraction, Buddhata or essence, is bottled up within the pluralized I. Thus, as Atman rends himself asunder into the Buddhi and the superior Manas, likewise, the superior Manas rends himself asunder into the Buddhata, into the essence. Indeed, the wretched intellectual animal could not incarnate in himself, within himself, his immortal triad, because he only possesses internal protoplasmic lunar bodies. Obviously, in his condition he will not resist the tremendous electro-spiritual voltage of Atman Buddhi Manas and would die. Whosoever wants to incarnate in himself, within himself, the totality of his soul, his divine immortal triad, must first descend into the ninth sphere, sex, in order to create his solar electronic bodies. Isabel lives within Atman. At this moment, the particle is, the eternal and feminine principle, and the Isiac mysteries come into my memory. Abel is the human soul, the noble spouse of the eternal beloved feminine soul. In fact, to incarnate the divine immortal triad signifies the second birth, which means to come out of the ninth sphere. The child who is born comes out from the womb. Whosoever is born within the superior worlds comes out of the ninth sphere, sex. Whosoever reaches the second birth is admitted into the temple of the twice-born. Whosoever reaches the second birth has to renounce sex for all eternity. The sexual act is absolutely forbidden for the twice-born. Whosoever violates this law will lose his solar bodies and will fall into the valley of bitterness. Whosoever reaches the second birth, which Jesus taught to Nicodemus, enters in fact and by his own right into the magus regnum. Regnum Dei. No one can enter into the kingdom dressed in the rags of a beggar, lunar rags. I know the case of an adept lady who in 10 years of intense work in the ninth sphere built her wedding gown, meaning her solar bodies. Now, this adept lady is an inhabitant of the kingdom. She dwells among the Elohim. It is difficult to establish the precise amount of time for the second birth, because this depends on the quality of work. Some people can attain the second birth in 15 or 20 years of intense work in the ninth sphere, others can endure much more time. Remember, Gnostic brethren, that our motto is thelema, willpower. Intimate self-realization is only for men and women with thelema. Before any twice-born, two paths are open, the path of the right and the path of the left. The path of the right is for those who work in the dissolution of the I. The path of the left is for those who commit the error of not working with the dissolution of the I. The twice-born who does not reduce his lunar ego to cosmic dust converts himself into an abortion of the cosmic mother. He becomes a merit, and there exist thousands of types of merits. Certain Oriental sects and some Muslim tribes commit the lamentable error of rendering cult to all of those families of merits. Every merit, every Hanasmus, plural, Hanasmussen, have in fact two personalities, one white and another black, one solar and another lunar. The innermost, the being dressed with the solar electronic bodies, is the white personality of the Hanasmussen, and the pluralized I dressed with the protoplasmic lunar bodies is the Hanasmus black personality. Therefore, these merits have a double center of gravity. To comprehend each of our psychological defects in each and every of the 49 regions of the subconsciousness is vital. However, it is not enough for the elimination of all the submerged entities that personify our errors. The mind cannot radically change anything. The mind itself can have the luxury of hiding its own errors, or justify them, or condemn them, or pass them from one department of the mind into another. Nonetheless, the mind is not capable of dissolving or eliminating them. Towards the ground and his feet towards the heavens. John E.O.U.A.N. The verb itself rests his head on the heart of the great Kabir Jesus, as if saying, love is nourished with love. The manner in which the Hierophant Peter dies, crucified on an inverted cross, is in order to indicate to us the work with the brute stone. It was necessary for Peter to die crucified with his head pointing towards the ground and his feet towards the heavens, in order to show us the descent into the ninth sphere, into Dante's ninth circle of hell. There exists an intimate relation between the ninth sphere and the cubic stone. Let us remember that the study of the novenary always concludes with the pointed cubic stone. Let us remember, Gnostic brethren, that the sacred stone has 9 faces and that the stone itself reunites the perfection of the cube and the equilibrated elevation of the pyramid with a quadrangular base. It is urgent to know that the horizontal ties is crossed with the vertical phallus in order to form the cross. The cross itself is phallic 100%. It is indispensable to know that when the pointed cubic stone is opened, and its faces lie spread open, we, inevitably, obtain the symbol of the cross as a perfect expression of the magisterium of fire. Hebraic Kabbalah places the Sephira Yesod in the sex. The cubic stone of Yesod is sex itself. It is urgent, it is indispensable to transport up to heaven the cup of election, the cup of Hermes. However, We must first work with the hard stone and give onto it the perfect cubic shape by treading on the path of Peter. It is written in the sacred scriptures that Peter asked Jesus, in reference to John, "Lord, and what shall this man do?" The great Kabir Jesus answered him, "If I will that he tarry till I come, what is that to thee? Follow thou me." John 21 verses 21-22. Curled up, John, the verb, tarries in the depth of the ark, lingering, waiting for the moment of his realization. No one can work in the path of John without having treaded upon the path of Peter. The fundamental clue of the path of Peter is the Methuna. In the path of John, the sexual act is absolutely forbidden. An abyss exists between the path of Peter and the path of John. It is indispensable to establish a bridge over that precipice in order to unite the two paths. It is urgent to hang, to lynch Judas on the bridge. Judas is the pluralized I, the myself that betrays the intimate Christ from moment to moment. In the Divine Comedy, Dante describes Judas' head within Lucifer's jaws and his feet dangling. Judas is the lunar legion of diabolic egos that every intellectual animal carries within himself. It is made out of the granulations of luciferic fire or negative fohat. Lucifer exists within the atomic infernos of the intellectual animal. It is that passionate, instinctual, sexual, and bestial fire that every person carries within. Judas is the crystallization of Lucifer. It is Lucifer's word which takes form. This is why Dante places Judas inside the sinister jaws of Lucifer. The existence of Judas would be impossible without Lucifer. Just as the fish dies when it is out of the water, likewise, Judas dies when out of the luciferic fire. The original sin is absolutely luciferic, sexual, and passionate. The root of any psychological defect is 100% luciferic. The origin of all evil is in Lucifer. Judas is the verb of Lucifer. If you want to hang Judas on the bridge in order to unite the path of Peter and the path of John, then kill Judas first. Remember, beloved reader, that Lucifer lives in the center of the earth, in the ninth sphere, in the depth of the universe. Lucifer is the staircase to ascend. Lucifer is the staircase to descend. Dante places in the mouth of Virgil the following phrase: "Expect that by such stairs as these, we must depart from evil so extreme." To gradually extinguish the luciferic fire is equivalent to ascending the luciferic staircase degree by degree. Virgil, the poet crowned with laurels, and sublime Dante, as a child, clutched Lucifer's neck. He caught fast the shaggy sides when the wings were opened enough, and down from pile to pile he descended and stepped between the thick fell and the jagged ice. And when he reached the point, where at the thigh upon the swelling of the haunches turns, with pain and much struggle, he turned his head around where his feet stood before, and grappled at the fell as one who mounts, that into hell he thought he turned again. One descends into the ninth sphere through the luciferic ladder. One ascends or comes out from the ninth sphere through the luciferic ladder. Lucifer, that miserable worm that passes through the world, the passionate fire, the tempting serpent of Eden, the repugnant viper that granted unto Eve the bitter food, is our worst adversary. Lucifer is the antithesis of Christ. It is that malignant reptile that slyly writhes through the green grass and perfumed flowers of spirituality. It would be impossible to reduce Judas to cosmic dust without previously extinguishing the luciferic fire. We have to perform a double work within our own atomic infernos. First, to transmute the lead into gold, and second, to execute Judas by hanging. When Dante performed this double alchemist and magical work, his guru told him, "Arise, upon thy feet. The way is long, and much uncouth the road. And now within 1 hour and half of noon the sun returns." The place wherein master and disciple stood was not like a palace hall, lofty and luminous, but a natural dungeon where ill footing was and scant supply of light. Any Gnostic himself that has concluded the double work can verify this. It is written that whosoever abandons the atomic infernos of nature immediately enters into the purgatorial region in order to fry or brown the seeds of the eye, as the Hindustani yogis stated. The evil tendencies of Judas remain within those malignant germs. The complicated purgatorial work, that is, to incinerate satanic seeds, is terribly difficult and more bitter than bile. Judas himself has 3 satanic aspects, because he betrays us in the world of desires, in the world of the mind, and in the field of willpower. This reminds us of the 3 traitors of Hiram Abiff. Also, to my memory comes the image of Lucifer holding 1 traitor within each of his 3 jaws. Dante stated that purgatory has 7 regions. However, if we multiply 7 by 7, then we will have the Kabbalistic number 49. These are the 49 regions of the subconsciousness. The 49 stables of Augias. It is a bitter and difficult task to eliminate the Luciferic fire in each and every one of the 49 regions of the subconsciousness. Whosoever performs this work has to weep tears of blood. The esoteric ordeals in each and every one of the 49 subconscious regions are incessantly repeated, and the twice-born intimately suffers within the frightful moral torments of the purgatorial state. An in-depth analysis upon this esoteric purgatorial work allows us to integrally comprehend that without the aid of our Divine Mother, within whom all of the powers of our sacred monad are contained, failure would be inevitable. From the sphere of solar fire and the path of John, the great law excludes the souls who did not kill Judas within themselves and who did not purify themselves amidst the flames of intimate purgatory. Hanasmussen are never admitted within the spheres of happiness. The absolute access into the solar heavens is only possible after having burned even the seeds of the pluralized I. Chapter 35. The Path of John. Since ancient times, the authentic and genuine esoteric work has always been symbolized by a chariot pulled by oxen transporting the holy Arkansas. Therefore, to forget this basic symbol and to go astray from the path is frightening. The chariot reminds us of the human being and his internal bodies. The oxen brings into our imagination the sacred cow with 5 legs, the sacred symbol of the Divine Mother. The sacred ark encloses the mysteries of sex. The ark itself is the same sex. In other times, the humble psalmist always paved the way for the holy cup, the cup of Hermes, by dancing and jumping, and in that moment, he was nothing more than a king. This also reminds us of the whirling dervishes of Mohammedan esotericism. The objective of all of these dances is to awaken the consciousness. Within ancient schools of mysteries, sex yoga, mithuna, was never taught onto the neophytes who previously did not accomplish with the basic requirement of self-awakening their consciousness. Asleep, unconscious neophytes cannot have cognizant consciousness of the work that they are performing. Thus, sooner or later they abandon the great work. Nevertheless, in these times of worldly crisis we have to take the risk and publicly teach sex yoga, no matter what the cost might be, because at the present time everything is lost. Therefore, at least we can rescue the hat of the drowning one. Present human beings are simple slugs from the mud who were born with the purpose of forming an angelical butterfly within them that could soar towards the justice of God without any impediments. Unfortunately, these defected insects, these miserable chrysalides, almost all remain without any development. Indeed, they only serve as nourishment for the entrails of this planet on which they live. It is urgent to tread upon the path of Peter and to hang Judas on the bridge in order to have the right of treading upon the heavenly path, the path of the Verb, the path of John. If to practice sexual magic, mithuna, is mandatory on the path of Peter, on the path of John sex is absolutely forbidden. The living golden feathered eagle of the spirit soars in the sky throughout the starry firmament and hovers with open wings waiting to descend, in the habit of hunting exclusively in the purgatorial fields. As lightning, this mysterious eagle of the spirit majestically lunges in order to snatch aloft the soul to the higher spheres of the universal fire. Ganymede metamorphosed as an eagle was snatched aloft to the high Olympus in order to serve the gods as a cupbearer. It is impossible to enter onto the heavenly path without having previously prepared oneself within the fields of the purgatorial region. Whosoever enters into the interior purgatory receives the mark of the letter P 7 times upon his forehead. Upon the sidereal forehead of the twice-born, the guardian angel of purgatory inscribes such a letter 7 times with the blunt point of his flaming sword. The guardian angel of purgatory says, "Look, when entered, that thou wash these scars away." The washing of feet symbolizes the same. It is written that at the Last Supper, before rising onto Golgotha, Jesus the Great Kabir washed the feet of his disciples. The scars of the 7 Ps upon the forehead are washed away little by little as the luciferic fire and all of the seeds of Judas are eliminated. The silver chariot, loaded with multiple stones made of the same lunar metal, must be delivered by the divine couple, Buddhi Manas. The chariot must be delivered as a gift to the temple of the Divine Mother. The sexual act is prohibited for the twice-born, not only in the physical world, but also in each and every one of the 49 regions of the subconsciousness. It is impossible to tread upon the path of John without having previously passed through purgatory. The path of John is the path of the verb. The army of the voice progresses and develops in 9 circles, which correspond with the 9 spheres of the sensible world. Starting with the inferior circle, the adept has to convert himself into an angel, later into an archangel, and finally he enters into the kingdom of the principalities. Continuing with the second circle, the adept has to transform himself first into a virtue, afterwards into a potency, and later into a dominion. Concluding with the third circle, the adept has to convert himself into a throne, later into a cherub, and in the end into a seraph. It is very opportune to remember that the master who founded the White Lodge on our planet Earth was precisely a throne known with the name of Sanat Kumara. This man lives in an oasis in the Gobi Desert. His age is indecipherable. His name is mentioned in many very ancient religious scriptures. Know that the Bodhisattva who renounces nirvana in order to live to benefit mankind is confirmed and called the thrice-honored. Thus, after having gained and lost nirvanas and eternities because of the boundless pity and compassion for the world of deluded mortals, the Bodhisattva finally has the right to enter into a world of supernirvanic happiness. When a master wants to reincarnate in order to help the wretched suffering humanity, he emanates, he projects his human soul, Bodhisattva, and commands his human soul to enter into the vestibule of the world, meaning, into a womb. Bodhisattvas possess solar bodies. When a bodhisattva allows himself to fall, he loses his solar bodies. It has been stated unto us that the fallen bodhisattvas must reincarnate under more and more difficult conditions until finally, after much suffering, they come and rise again. Bodhisattvas who are definitively lost, bodhisattvas who did not rise in spite of having had an assigned, determined number of lives for their rising, bodhisattvas who did not take advantage of their opportunities, enter into the submerged devolution within the infernal worlds accused of 3 crimes. First, having had assassinated his Buddha. Second, having dishonored the gods. Third, other various debts. In these times of the end, that great initiate from the past Mahamanvantara, called in cosmogony Mahamanvantara of Padma or Lotus of Gold, has sent his bodhisattva to the earth. The name of that great initiate is very well known in the Old Testament. He is the biblical Jehovah. He is the most exalted being of the ancient lunar chain, the governor of the ancient moon earth. It has been stated to us that the Bodhisattva of the Lord Jehovah was born in a certain country in South America within a humble family of working peasants. The Bodhisattva of Lord Jehovah had a joyful, simple, and easy infancy and adolescence. However, now, 1967, he is a youngster, and this worries us, because of what his modern surroundings are like and the types of friends he could have in these times. In these moments, this youngster lives in a certain city. Obviously, he is doing the same inappropriate nonsense as all the other youths of this epoch. If the reincarnation of this bodhisattva becomes a success, then the great Master Jehovah will incarnate within his bodhisattva and will perform a great work. When a bodhisattva renounces all of his psychic powers, when he radically eliminates the false idea that in order to be happy he needs something external, then, a particular knowledge, a marvelous resplendence will come upon him. In occultism, this is called Durnia Mega, cloud of virtue. These types of bodhisattvas can no longer fall. These types of bodhisattvas possess within themselves all of the basis of knowledge. They enjoy the most profound peace, and from their hearts spring the substance of love. Based on renunciations, each time more incredible, one advances on the path of John. Thus, just as a tree has many branches, likewise, many transverse paths sprout from the direct path. Many of those paths take us to elemental paradises where we convert ourselves into genii or devas of nature. Other paths lead us into the entrails of the cosmos where we transform ourselves into planetary gods. Other paths submerge us into the joy of nirvana, etc. Those who abandon the direct path, those who enter onto the transverse paths, sooner or later have to reincarnate in order to return to the path of John, the heavenly path, the direct path. Omniscience and omnipotence are very coveted qualities. These confer upon us remarkable powers over all of nature. If we renounce these tremendous powers, then the destruction of certain seeds occurs that in one way or another, after every great pralaya, always brings us into new manifestations through successive Mahamanvantras. It is urgent to know, it is indispensable to comprehend that the universe is made up of an illusory nature. We need to die, and to die within ourselves and to renounce. Renounce, and to cease existing within all of the seven cosmos in order to have the right to be within the Absolute. Chapter 36. Story of the Chinese Master Cao Feng. The Chinese Master Cao Feng entered the priesthood at the age of 15 and was ordained at the age of 20 in the monastery of Chin Su. Cao Feng comprehended that all human beings are miserable, sleeping automatons. Therefore, he proposed to awaken his consciousness as soon as possible by means of the science of meditation. Cao Feng performed his first works under the intelligent and wise guidance of the Master Tuan Chao, who taught him how to work with the Hua Tu, mysterious phrase. Where was I before birth? Where shall I be after death? Cao Feng decided to work with this Hua Tu. However, he was unable to concentrate his mind on it due to the bifurcation of this phrase. This Hua Tu divided his mind into many opinions and opposite concepts, and Cao Feng suffered unbelievably. He yearned with all of his heart and all of his soul to liberate himself from mental dualism. It is impossible to experience the reality as long as the essence, the Buddhata, the soul, continues bottled up within intellectual dualism. Opposing opinions, the struggle between opposite concepts and antithetic ideas correspond to the different illusory functions of the mind. Thus, Cao Feng aguishly wept tears of blood. He only aspired to free himself from the bottle of mental dualism, but he failed with the Hua Tu of Master Tuan Chao. The story goes on to tell of Cao Feng's terrible anguish and desperation. He seeks Master Su Yen, who, feeling compassion for his pain, teaches him the powerful mantra Wu. Master Su Yen demanded daily reports from him about his work. The mantra Wu is chanted with a double Wu, Wu, as if imitating a howling hurricane amongst the boisterous waves of the furious sea. During this exercise, the mind must be absolutely quiet and in a profound and frightful silence, both in the exterior as well as in the interior. Not even the slightest desire, nor the most insignificant thought must agitate the profound lake of the mind. The explanations of Master Su Yen were indeed so simple and clear that his disciple Cao Feng fell into negligence and laziness, because he frankly did not need to make any effort to comprehend them. However, Master Su Yen, in spite of his accustomed sweetness, also knew how to be very severe when necessary. One day, Cao Feng entered Master Su Yen's room as usual. His master very severely asked, "Who has brought this corpse in your name?" He was barely finished with the question when he threw Cao Feng out of the room. Soon, Cao Feng followed Qin Shan's example and sought refuge in the meditation room. The exercises of inner meditation gradually provoke the awakening of the consciousness, the awakening of the Buddhata. Before the internal supersensible representations, the neophyte begins to react in a very distinct, very different manner than usual. He begins saying, "I am dreaming. This is a dream." Later, happily he exclaims, "I am out of my physical body. My physical body is asleep, but I am out of my physical body, totally cognizant and awake." On one occasion, while Cao Feng was out of his sleeping body, he remembered with total meridian clarity the koan that asks, "If all things are reduced to a unity, then, unto what is unity reduced to?" Chinese traditions tell us that at that moment, his mind was filled with terrible confusions to the point that he could no longer distinguish east from west, or north from south. On the sixth day, while enduring such an unhappy mental state in the Lumigial of meditation, with infinite devotion Cao Feng whispered the collective prayers. Then when he lifted his head, he clairvoyantly saw those last two mysterious phrases of that Oriental poem composed by the fifth patriarch. Pa Yen, oh, it is thou, whom I have always known, thou who comes and goes in the 30,000 days of a century. Immediately, Cao Feng began to work with the mysterious and enigmatic phrase, who has brought this corpse in your name? It had remained recorded within his mind ever since that day, in which Master Su Yen had pronounced it. It was impossible to forget. He felt as if his mind and his personality had perished and as if his divine spirit had resurrected after death. He felt happy, as if a huge load and an enormous bundle had been lifted from his shoulders. He achieved his goal. He attained the awakening of his consciousness in 3 years. He was then 24 years old. When Cao Feng was asked, "Can you dominate yourself in plain daylight?" he answered with firmness, "Yes, I can." "Can you dominate yourself when you are dreaming?" His answer was again, "Yes, I can." "Where is the master when you sleep without dreaming?" Cao Feng was unable to find the answer for this last question. Thus, new inner sufferings afflicted the depth of his soul. Then the master told him, "From now on, I do not want you to study Buddhism, nor Dharma. I do not want you to study anything neither ancient nor new. I only want you to eat when you are hungry and to lie down when you are tired. As soon as you wake up, make your mind alert and ask yourself who is the master of this awakening, and where does his body rest and where does his life lead?" Cao Feng was certainly a man of thelema, willpower. Thus, he decided with total firmness that in some way he had to understand this, even if his determination might make him look like an idiot for the rest of his days. 5 years of intensive work elapsed. One ordinary day, when he was working on this matter in the middle of his sleep, a fellow monk who slept beside him in the communal dormitory of the monastery unconsciously pushed his pillow and it fell. a little village in the ancient province of Fars, in southern Persia, in the year 224 AH 857 CE, and was the grandson of a devotee of the great master Zoroaster. Al-Hallaj was initiated into the great mysteries of Sufism. Arabian traditions tell us that when he was 40 years old, he disagreed with the jurists and orthodox traditionalist religious scholars. Thus, he went to the streets to directly teach the multitudes the sublime principles of spiritual life. It is written that Al-Hallaj, the great Sufi master, taught with his word and with his example. Indefatigably he traveled throughout Iran, India, Turkey, etc., reaching even the very borders of ancient China. The great master Al-Hallaj was without a doubt a tremendous revolutionary. Jealous and envious politicians accused him of being a dangerous agitator. Religious scholars of the law accused him of being a heretic when he mixed the human with the divine. When divulging the esoteric mysteries amidst the people, the masters of Sufism themselves did not have any difficulty of accusing him of breaking the discipline of that which is arcane. Thus, as is natural in those cases, judges were willing to condemn him for many supposed crimes, for example, fraudster, impostor, black magician, warlock, sorcerer, profaner of mysteries, people's agitator, ignorant preacher, enemy of the government, etc. Al-Hallaj, the mystic Sufi, was imprisoned in an infamous jail for 9 years and afterwards vilely mutilated and executed on the 27th of March of 922 in the year 309 of Hejra. Islamic sacred traditions tell that when the terrible night came, the night in which he was taken from his dungeon in order to be executed at dawn, he stood and uttered the ritualistic prayer and prostrated himself 2 times. Those who saw him stated that when his prayer was concluded, he persistently repeated, "Deceitfulness, deceitfulness." All through the long and dark night, and after a long and profound silence, he exclaimed, "Truthfulness, truthfulness," and raised up again. He tied the veil on his head, covered himself with his blessed shroud, extended his sacred Christified hands, turned his divine countenance towards the Kaaba, entered into ecstasy and spoke with his internal God. At daylight, when he left the prison, the multitudes saw him happily dancing in a complete joyful ecstasy under the weight of his irons. The merciless executioners took him to the public square, where they cut his hands and feet, after flagellating him 500 times. Ancient traditions from the Arabian world state that after having been flagellated and mutilated, Al-Hallaj was crucified. Many people hear him talking in ecstasy to his Father who is in secret from his own Golgotha. O God of mine! I am going to enter into the abode of my wishes, there I will contemplate thy marvels. O God of mine! If you manifest thy love even to him that wounds thee, how then would thou not give thy love to the one who is wounded because of thee? After this prayer sprouted from the most holy heart of Al-Hallaj, the people who watched the torture saw Abu Bakr al-Shabli, who while advancing towards the scaffold of tortures, shouted very strongly the following verse, "Had we not prohibited thee to receive guests, whether a man or an angel?" Then Abu Bakr asked, "What is mysticism?" Al-Hallaj answered, "Behold, his minor degree before thee." Abu Bakr asked again, "And where is his supreme degree?" Al-Hallaj answered, "Thou cannot have access unto it, nonetheless, tomorrow thou shalt see what shall come. I testify it in the divine mystery within which it exists, albeit it is hidden for thee." At the evening hour, the hour of prayer, came the order of the cruel sanguinary Caliph, authorizing the beheading of the victim, yet his executioners said, "It is too late, let him be decapitated tomorrow." Very early in the morning, the Caliph's command was fulfilled and Al-Hallaj, still alive, was brought down from the cross and was carried away in order to slit his throat. Then, a certain witness heard Al-Hallaj uttering in a loud voice, "What the ecstatic one wants is, the unique, and no one else but himself." Thereafter, filled with ecstasy, he recited the following sacred verse, "Those who do not believe in the last hour are dragged with haste towards it, however, the believers wait for it with a reverential fear, since they know it is the truth." Thus, this is how with these solemn words the life of the omnicosmic and most holy Al-Hallaj concluded. Hence, his venerable bleeding blessed head fell under the edge of the sword as a sanguinary holocaust on the altar of the supreme sacrifice for humanity. The poisonous hatred of his executioners was so great that they did not even authorize his cadaver to be shrouded or have a burial service. Ancient traditions of Islam tell that the sacred ashes of the old Sufi al-Hallaj were dispersed in the winds from the heights of the Minara. Ancient Arabic legends state that instead of a white blanket, this saint's cadaver was rolled up in a filthy rug formerly damped in petroleum. When the holy body burned, consumed by the fire of the Holocaust, the whole of nature shook, filled with infinite terror. The great Hierophant Sufi al-Hallaj, by means of chisel and hammer, transformed the brute stone and gave a perfect cubic shape onto it. Before physically dying, the great immolated al-Hallaj was already absolutely dead psychologically. The resplendent diamond soul of Mansur al-Hallaj is treading upon the heavenly path, heading towards the absolute. The great Sufi initiate al-Hallaj was born, died, and sacrificed himself completely for humanity. Now it is worthy to conclude this chapter with that ineffable prayer written with infinite love by the Mohammedan Christ Mansur al-Hallaj, entitled, O thou wholeness of my wholeness. Lo and behold, here I am, O my secret, O my confidence. Lo and behold, here I am, here lamb, O thou my aspiration, O thou my consequence. I call upon thee. No, thou art the one who calls me towards thee. How could I have talked to thee, if thou would not have talked to me? O thou essence of the essence of my existence, O thou end result of my design, thou who makest me talk, O thou my enunciations, thou my blinks. O thou wholeness of my wholeness, O my ear, O my sight. O my totality, my constitution, and my parts. O thou wholeness of my wholeness, wholeness of everything, equivocal enigma, I darken the wholeness of thy wholeness when wanting to express thy being. O thou, from whom my spirit was suspended before now when dying of ecstasy. Ah, thy pledge continues being my misfortune. O supreme objective that I request and wait, O my guest. O nourishment of my spirit. O my life in this world and in the other. Let my heart be thy ransom. O my ear, O my sight. Why so much delay in my seclusion, so distant? Ah, albeit thy presence, before my eyes, is hidden within the invisible. My heart by now contemplates thee, from my remoteness, yes, from my exile. Final salutations. This is how the master Samael Aun Weor concluded his 1967/1968 Christmas message. Beloved Gnostic brethren, we have finished this 1967/1968 Christmas message. Please, I beg you to study it in depth, to practice it and to live it. Do not be like intellectual butterflies that flutter around reading about everything and not knowing anything. Today they are in a little school and tomorrow in another, and finally they die after having wasted their time miserably. Study everything in depth, do not be superficial. Remember that life in abundance, where thousands of fish multiply, and where everything is happiness, exists within wells where the waters are clear and profound. However, the superficial road's puddles, the vain puddles without profundity, soon dry up under the heat of the sunlight and turn into mud and rottenness. Be profound friends of mine, frequent always the rooms of meditation, our beloved Gnostic Lamigials. Love your worst enemies with all of your heart and with all of your soul. Kiss the whip of you executioner, bless those who damn and persecute you, return good for evil. Beloved brethren, I have the high honor of inviting you to a constant epistolary interchange, but please I beg you, I beseech you, do not send me any type of praise, adulations, or cheers. It is urgent, it is indispensable for you to comprehend that I, as a person, am insignificant. I am worth a little bit less than the ashes of a cigarette. Thus, I am somebody who indeed does not have the least bit of importance. Therefore, with much sincerity I tell you that any letter containing praise, adulation, and cheers will be rejected. Treat me heart to heart, from good to good, from love to love. Remember that Hermetic maxim that states, I give thee love within which the whole summum of wisdom is contained. To my worst enemies, those who hate me, damn me, and persecute me too much, those who criticize my books, I send them through this Christmas message a fraternal hug filled with true love. I adore my enemies, I adore my critics and wish for all of them, as is natural, a Merry Christmas and a Happy New Year. Beloved Gnostic brethren who study this 1967 Christmas message, verily, verily I say unto you that I feel joyful when I answer your letters, but you have to learn how to be patient because sometimes the answer is delayed due to the fact that it is not only your letter that I have to answer. Remember that thousands of people write to me and I have to answer all of them. Beloved, let the Nativity star shine within your hearts. With all of my heart and with all of my soul, I wish you a Merry Christmas and a prosperous New Year. Inverential peace. Samael Aun Weor.